My sister always turned justice into her weapon against others. She asked why I wasn't eating the candies that Aunt so kindly brought. She said coldly that I was terrible and that our aunt would be very upset. I simply suggested, if she was so worried, let her eat them herself. In response, my sister crossed her arms and fell silent, not even looking my way. She stubbornly tried to make me eat them because she didn't want to herself. She often used guilt, pretending to be an overly righteous person. That's why I decided to live completely separately from her. Sitting in the passenger seat, she lazily and resentfully sighed. She started whining and asked if we had arrived yet. I gripped the steering wheel and sharply told her, "Be quiet, I've already answered." We drove up to the temporary parking lot of the fireworks festival. When I opened the trunk, she stretched, sighed, and complained that she was tired. I glanced over our supplies, bento, and drinks. A sly, satisfied smile played on her face. She asked which refrigerator had the alcohol and immediately offered to carry the heaviest one. My friend patted me on the shoulder in her own way. She knew about her cunning trick. She waved goodbye and said they would go ahead to save a spot. I was left alone and had to deal with all the things by myself. I sighed, good that she took at least something with her, better than nothing. I gathered my thoughts and realized that I had finally come this far. Next year I will go to study at college far from home and finally become free from her. At that moment there was a terrible crack and then a scream. My face froze in genuine surprise and complete incomprehension. I found myself in the forest and looked around in surprise. Where had the parking lot gone? "What, is this the very same parking lot?" I murmured quietly, not believing my eyes. I was carrying our things, and there was no trace of the car left. I raised my eyes to the unfamiliar trees. Only the birdsong was heard around. I wondered, had I really arrived at the camp, or was I just dreaming? I frantically checked my phone, but there was no signal at all. I forced myself to calm down. If I walked on foot, I would definitely find some town. Taking a deep breath, I stepped into the dense, quiet forest. The road quickly led me to a small, clear stream that sparkled brightly in the sun. I sat on the bank and noticed with admiration how clean and beautiful the water was here. I got ready to walk a little further along the river. The stream led us to a wide shore where a strong wind was wildly blowing. After a long walk, I stood, breathing heavily, stunned by what I saw. I walked for a very long time and met no one. How is that possible? My stomach loudly growled, tearing me away from tangled thoughts. With relief, I found a refrigerator with drinks and bento. I sat on the rocky shore and began to eat, feeling as if I was merging with the earth. I noticed that the beach was clean, not a single piece of plastic was visible. With gloomy certainty, I realized that I would have to prepare for an overnight stay. The sun slowly slipped behind the horizon, leaving long shadows behind. With pliers from our kit, I carefully removed the bark from the fin. I was glad that thanks to my sister, I had taken these things, and I did not even suspect how they would come in handy. I remembered how I once sat and watched a survival show, and now it became my only guide in this new reality. I took on the hard work, kindling a fire with a bow drill. Unknown to me, the work exhausted me. My whole body ached from constant tension. My hands suddenly hurt and trembled, and my strength quickly faded. I felt my heart urging me. I had to hurry before sunset and light the fire as soon as possible. Only when I was almost giving up did a thin strip of smoke appear. Seeing the smoke, I cried. Desperate hope flared up inside me again. I carefully breathed on the precious ember, gently blowing the tiny flame to make it grow. Finally, the fire truly caught flame. I felt I must protect it at any cost. The dark forest surrounded me on all sides, and above my head the starry sky scattered. The campfire crackled, casting warm, tiny light into the boundless darkness. Tired, I lay down and rejoiced. How warm my jacket was. Gradually, I was sinking into sleep, whispering to myself that everything would be fine. I hoped so much that I would wake up, and all this would turn out to be just a dream. The morning was filled with the cheerful chirping of birds echoing from the trees. I woke up abruptly. My head was still resting on my backpack. A smoking campfire and my worst suspicions were confirmed. This was all really happening. In panic, I gasped fearfully, seeing that the precious flame was almost extinguished. I quickly added more firewood and sighed with relief. Disaster was narrowly avoided. I decided to head in a different direction than yesterday to look for help. I still needed firewood, and meanwhile I scratched the itchy insect bites on my arm. I was making my way through dense thickets, and with every step my determination only grew stronger. Suddenly I stopped and opened my eyes wide. This, I thought, stunned. I found myself on a high cliff, from where an endless empty ocean stretched out before me. Finally it dawned on me. I was stranded on a deserted island. I saw no mainland, only other small islands far away. A sudden rustle in the bushes behind made me turn sharply. Who's there? I listened tensely and looked back at the forest from time to time. Suddenly someone's legs appeared from behind the trees. Why? I whispered to myself. Why did this happen to me? I'm here only because of my sister. I didn't want to go to the fireworks at all, and now I'm left here alone. I paused for a moment. Why was I even caring about this fire? Ah, yes, to survive. I stood with an empty gaze and felt everything around me collapsing. Looking for a way out, I found myself in front of a wonderful waterfall. The water was rushing down. I was surprised that such a beautiful place could be hidden on this island. I saw bubbles in the water and immediately understood this is a water source. I noticed this new important place is located very close to my first camp. I barely smiled. A thought flashed through my mind. Maybe I'm finally starting to get lucky. I decided to move my camp here, let the smoke be noticed from the ship. When I realized this would be for a long time, I started sawing logs to build a shelter. I don't stop for a moment. I drag heavy logs through the forest. I decided to build a real hut and began driving sharpened stakes into the ground. I drove a post deep into the ground, thinking that would be enough for it to hold well. I was worried the structure might not hold, so I decided to add a few more supports. While a small fire quietly crackled, I calmly ate in my unfinished hut. I glanced at my last bento and realized I needed to go look for new food. I suddenly jumped when an unexpected noise sounded in the bushes outside. I carefully peeked out of my hideout and felt that a predator was lurking nearby. I thought it might be a boar or a rabbit, so I rushed to finish building the walls as fast as possible. I lay exhausted on my improvised bed and wildly dreamed of just taking a bath. A new morning dawned, and the sky was filled with the cheerful song of birds. To my surprise, I came across a river where whole schools of fish were swimming. I stepped into the cool water, splashing with all my might, and tried to catch something. I raised the trophy up, smiling broadly and triumphantly. That's how. He enters the shallow river and immediately sees, here it is very easy to catch fish. His first catch sizzles and crackles while he fries it on a freshly lit campfire. He cuts a large, appetizing piece. This is his first real meal in this new world. He chews the food, sitting thoughtfully in his shelter, and thinks how sharply he lacks salt to taste it. He decides to drink spring water so as not to waste the bottled drinks he still has left. Falling asleep, he promised himself that tomorrow he would work well on his house. He kneels and digs a ditch around his hut so that rainwater does not flood it. He diligently, move by move, coated the wooden structure of his shelter with a thick layer of wet clay. He wipes his forehead and feels pride for how confidently he moves forward. He draws up a roof plan and decides to make an improvised window from vinyl film. The dense forest canopy generously offers branches and leaves from which a wonderful roof can be crafted. He lights a fire in the stone stove to warm his home. He sits inside and rejoices he managed to build a dry and reliable shelter from the rain. He feels the stones gently warming. They reliably ward off the night chill. A new, ambitious idea sparks in him. Now he wants to build a bathhouse. He inspects his small stone pool, which he built with his own hands, and considers it enough. He takes a long stick and uses it to pull a heated stone from the fire. He comes to help when hot stones, touching cold water, scatter in all directions. He remembers one must be more careful with hot and fragile stones. He dives into the hot water and sighs with satisfaction, true bliss. Resting, he dreams of cooking stew. He is already tired of simple fried fish. He notices the autumn leaves a clear sign that the season is changing. He shivers in the bath, feeling how the air becomes increasingly colder over time. His clay pot bubbles joyfully on the crackling fire. He sips the soup and in his thoughts unfolds a dream to learn more to diversify his modest diet. Once bright, the forest loses its shine as the winter cold descends on the ground. He freezes before his brand new hut, a sturdy home he built with his own hands and which became a true proof of his endurance. He smiles proudly, thinking that although something can still be improved, this is already a success. He raises his gaze and sees that the distant mountain peak is already covered with snow. He barely makes his way through the first snow, and the piercing cold turns into a real danger for him. He notices several mushrooms on the log and is not sure if they can be eaten. He wisely decides not to eat them because he knows it is too dangerous. Night falls, enveloping his lonely hut. It glows with a solitary light in the midst of wild nature. In the fierce silence of the frosty air, a knock sounded clearly as if he were chopping wood. Sitting inside, he focuses all his attention on keeping the small fire from going out and warming him in the cold. He sees steam rising from his mouth and feels soon it will snow here. He worries the fish are becoming fewer, and he is tormented by the thought that his food is also running out. He silently counts the minutes in his mind. How much longer can he hold on? How long will he endure? A sudden noise in the hut makes him open his eyes wide with unease. A bright streak of light, like lightning, flashes through the darkness of his small shelter. He sits by the almost extinguished fire and suddenly shudders from some strange, incomprehensible phenomenon. A chilling thought grips him. Could he really die here? He presses his knees to his chest, exhausted and oppressed by his absolute loneliness. Suddenly, a bright ball of light appears nearby, rushing and squeaking, apologizing in all directions. He steps back confusedly and looks around in surprise as light spins around him. He apologizes for the situation he got into. The ball of light loudly announces that he was summoned to this world as a hero. Then they tell him this is no longer the world he remembers. He freezes and stares stunned, unable to comprehend what he heard. The ball repeats its incredible message again, and it confirms a terrible new reality. He asks the ball, was he really just a random victim? He reaches out to the light, demanding to be returned back, but the light replies that it cannot do that. The ball explains that those summoned were precisely those barely clinging to the edge of death. He can hardly believe this is his own world and keeps repeating, this simply cannot be. He asks what is this place, his face full of confusion and embarrassment. The ball presents before his eyes a picture of a fantastic world and asks, is this what you are looking for? He assures that he has not seen any monsters and anxiously asks if this is not a spirit. The spirit whispers with regret that it was once a god, but lost all its power during the summoning. It boldly boasts that its power quickly recovered, although it is still weakened now. The spirit explains, the purpose of the summoning is simply to momentarily connect two worlds. It weaves words about complex ideas of deification, and he understands nothing at all. The spirit whispered that the heroes were supposed to be three people who stood on the brink of death. It apologizes again, whispering that it did not notice how he ended up in this mess along with it. He burst out screaming in surprise when he realizes that the summoned hero was his treacherous older sister. Suddenly he is struck by a terrible realization. He too was standing on the edge of death. He recalled that there were also some problems raging in the human world. Suddenly a group of powerful beings appears before him, looking like real gods. He finds himself among countless gods, and their grandeur simply takes his breath away. The little Orpanics beg one of the gods not to reveal their secret. The god of merriment strictly tells Panique Door, it's already late. Buffin decided for now not to bother himself with the fate of the boys and not to pay attention to the spheres. The young goddess Miss Hut approaches him, while the sphere slowly transforms into a wolf. The spirit explains that Rish failed, and therefore the summoning spell started to work at a greater distance. He accuses the spirit of a mistake, but the latter immediately denies his guilt. Fafon forced everyone to freeze and sternly said that they would deal with this later. The old goddess Val looked at him and quietly asked, which of the present gods does he choose? Fafon says that to survive in this new world, he will have to choose a patron among the gods. They will give him strength and tools, but in return will take part of his remaining life. Olnya proudly calls himself the god of strength, fire, destruction, and rebirth. The same man with dark hair introduced himself, Rurdal from Earth, Silence, and Magic. That old man with a long white beard is Hakel, who is well versed in both order and magic. A serious guy called himself and said simply, he is connected with water and healing. The good old woman is not a simple woman, she is Val, the goddess of earth and harvest. The cheerful girl Misha says, with a smile, that she is the goddess of light and wind. The beautiful blonde is the goddess of light, love, and beauty herself, a true alpha in everything. Karolpur says sadly that Rish, the wolf, has almost completely lost his power. He looks with anger at the weakened spirit, irritated by his recent overconfidence. He asked if the powers of different gods can coincide with each other. Buffoon explains many different creatures appeared, but only the strongest or those who arrived on time survived. He froze. A complex question was swirling in his head, which of these mighty gods to choose. He looks at the gathered gods and hesitates, is it necessary to choose them all at once? Gaul warns, if you choose all at once, their powers will start to interfere with each other and gradually weaken. He notices the gods do not get along with each other, so it is unlikely they will manage to cooperate. How strongly he is blessed will determine how suitable he is for this god. It is worth explaining how relationships, love, friendship, or obsession affect power. He is completely confused and cannot comprehend these complex divine rules. Galad advises him to stop and truly think about what exactly he wants to achieve in this world. He freezes and asks himself, what does he really want to achieve? He just wants to live in peace and comfort, without extra responsibilities. He sincerely wishes that he would never have to deal with his sister at all. He also wants to be able to freely travel this new world, independent of anyone. I should explain that his sister has a strongly developed sense of justice, and he knows that she often uses him for her own purposes. Gallic says that his power awakens only when his sister acts. He asked excitedly, what exactly are the abilities the gods gave to his sister? Upon learning that she possesses all magic and absolute control, he is gripped by true horror. Seeing his despair, the god Gokul decided to give him exactly the power that suits him. Gully lists a bunch of different skills, and finally says that he can harshly deal with even the most terrible enemy. He tries on this terrible name for himself, but ultimately agrees to the god's offer. The group stands in a quiet, dark forest, and above them twinkles the starry sky. Hal extends to him a wonderful sword for beheading a thing without which he would not survive. The fan god gives him a heavy pouch of gold for a new life. Miss Hid extends a small packet of powder that accelerates plant growth. Hal is convinced it is he who should thank the guys for their understanding. The tiny wolf spirit Rish sweetly dozes in the snow, occasionally twitching its paws. He begged the gods to allow him to take this defenseless little wolf cub with him. He says now that Rish is powerless, he himself will protect her. He gently strokes the sleeping wolf and whispers to him that he is glad that he is nearby. The spirit quietly exhaled a soft sound, as if announcing that it accepts a new master. Buffoon starts the broadcast and sternly warns him, be careful with new possibilities. Standing before a grand event, he whispers a promise to himself to live peacefully and comfortably. He looks around, captivated by the majestic beauty of the snowy landscape. The estate is hidden in the valley, and in the distance a small village is visible. He is enchanted by the beauty of the scenery and wonders how the air can be so warm when snow lies all around. He thinks to himself, this is not just a house, but a real mansion. Accidentally seeing himself in the mirror, he cannot believe his eyes before him is a new, younger face. Pressing Rish to himself, he looks at him with surprise and does not understand what happened to his face. His cheeks burn as he realizes that God chose his new appearance from 3 young options. He cautiously peeks around the corner, still trying to comprehend what happened to his body. Entering the hallway, he immediately freezes with admiration. The beautiful stone floor simply enchants. Wide stairs with wooden railings stretch up to the upper floors of the estate. The living room is cozy, there is a fireplace here, and nearby stands a comfortable, soft armchair with upholstery. The kitchen is in a rustic style, but not simple. It has everything needed, a large brick stove and convenient work surfaces. He stands in the middle of a large library and admires how spacious it is. He peeks into another room, his heart pounding. What else does this majestic house hide? He stumbles upon a huge pantry, its shelves packed with food, and is so surprised he can hardly utter a word. Holding Rish in his arms, he recognizes familiar food and seems to immerse himself in it all as if in a dream. He comes across a large wooden barrel, inside which live trout and salmon are swimming. The familiar fish make him freeze and ponder. Could this place be connected to his former world? After months of hunger, seeing so much food, his stomach suddenly growled loudly. Looking at his dirty hands, he decides, first to wash and only then to eat. He contentedly dips his paws into a warm bath and sighs deeply. Diving into the warmth, he feels his heart fill with true happiness and deep calm. He wants to learn how to clean rice, so he decides to test his new divine abilities. Finally dressed, he stands before a large wooden melon and prepares to work. He looks intently, activating his powerful ability to analyze for the first time. He immediately understood how the mill works and marvels at his new knowledge with excitement. The heavy wooden mill spins, tightly pressing the grain. He finds Rich sound asleep in a woven basket he prepared for the spirit. He remembers how Rish gave himself to him, and now he will support him with his strength. He gently strokes the sleeping wolf and promises to feed him meat as soon as he recovers. In the kitchen, he skillfully wields the knife. The cabbage is sliced into thin pieces. He generously sprinkles the thick piece of tenderloin with freshly ground black pepper. The meat, generously seasoned with spices, is placed on the hot frying pan and it sizzles cheerfully. He skillfully flips the steak and admits that he likes this unusual combination. He recalls how on the island he ate only fish and how he got tired of such monotonous food. He lifts the lid of the wooden pot, and inside lies perfectly white, fluffy rice from which steam rises. The finished dish is carefully placed on the plate. It looks extremely appetizing and already promises to be very tasty. He folds his hands together and sincerely thanks for the food. He cuts a piece of juicy steak with a knife and fork, holding his breath before the first bite. He brings the first, perfectly cooked piece of juicy steak to his mouth. He tastes it and with surprise utters one word, delicious. He gladly savors the juicy meat, fluffy rice, and crunchy cabbage. It is simply the perfect combination. Sitting alone at the large table, he suddenly realizes he survived. He dives headfirst into the soft, comfortable bed. He hasn't felt such luxury for many months. Falling asleep, he quietly rejoices. He is no longer afraid that his fire will go out. He accepts the new reality and realizes that from now on, he will live in a completely unfamiliar world. The next morning, he wakes up and thinks that the bed is even too soft for sleep. The sun rises over the roof of his new home and gives the beginning of a new day. A week has passed, and he takes the laundry outside to hang it and let it dry. He has slept through almost the entire week, gathering strength bit by bit after a hard life on the island. Having rested, he happily finishes washing his laundry and smiles. In the kitchen before him, a whole row of recipes has opened up dishes that can be made from what is at hand. He thinks about making ramen, that favorite dish from his past life that always brings his thoughts back home. He has laminaria, but he bitterly realizes that there is nothing to grind the wheat into flour. He looks at the sacks of wheat and understands. Until the grain is ground into flour, those sacks are useless to him. On the table, a simple and so tasty dinner, baked fish, soup, and rice. He chooses a simple dish and with pleasure immerses himself in familiar, favorite flavors. He decides to go to the store and buy containers to store flour when he grinds it. He unfolds a large, detailed map that he received from the gods and excitedly begins to plan his first journey. He carefully studies the map, looking for the place recommended by the gods. Having found the right place, he immediately activates his teleportation ability and transports there. He appears on a hill, and from there the city of Kasim with its high walls unfolds before him. Looking at the map and relying on his unique knowledge, he recognizes the border city of Kashum. He knows Kasim is the place where adventurers gather to hunt monsters in the nearby forest. Standing by the city gates, the guard stopped him and asked to show documents and an entry permit. He explains his situation and suddenly notices that other adventurers are watching him closely. He wonders, is it because of the new clothes or that changed, almost divine appearance that he stands out among others? He throws on a new cloak with a hood and, as if blending with the shadow, is confident. Now he can survey everything around without attracting attention. He examined the coarsely woven fabric at the market and immediately understood it was of low quality. In the store, he looks at various goods with interest, which can be bought. During shopping, he comes across exactly the things he needs and immediately imagines how they will be useful to his friend Rishu. He tightly clutches the bag with money, realizing that it contains a large sum, a gift from the gods themselves. His gaze caught on a bizarre, beautifully decorated bottle on the neighboring shelf. He immediately recognizes that stylish bottle is the very potion that appears in many video games. He decides to use his skill of evaluation to find out what it is made of. He walks past a food stall and looks with interest at what is being prepared in this new world. When he looks closely at the sausage, a picture of bacteria seems to appear before his eyes and he feels disgusted. He shuddered with surprise when he saw that someone was using a ladle at the neighboring counter. He sees a wonderful grape trellis and decides to walk around the farm in search of some tools. He approaches the seller and, looking into the box, asks hopefully if he can buy the pitchforks lying there. He looked at the woman and quietly asked, can he also take a small cutting from the grapevine? Almost finishing the shopping, he suddenly noticed a weapons store. The smiling seller noticed the unfamiliar buyer and kindly offered him to buy leather armor. He imagined himself in metal armor in the middle of summer and immediately changed his mind about wearing it. He blossomed with a smile and sincerely thanked his grandmother for the useful advice. Entering the weapons store was like stepping into the world of a video game. He chose his knife. It was the most convenient for fighting. Evaluating other weapons was too difficult, so he simply stuck with his own. He bought armor made of goat monster leather and also grabbed a bag and a large sack. When the dust settled over the city, he felt the fatigue pressing on his shoulders after a hard day. He rested near the gates and decided not to use teleportation in front of people. It was time to return to his estate, leave the things, and make sure that Rish was okay. Under the starry sky, he decided, tomorrow he would go to the Adventurers Guild. The next day he stood in front of the huge guild house, built from massive wooden beams. He entered the noisy tavern and walked to the counter to register. The administrator explained the registration options, and he, without hesitation, decided to pay the fee. While she was filling out his tag, he suddenly said he had one more request. While waiting, he reached for the nearby shelf and pulled out an old, thick book. He began reading about the monster forest. It is truly a very valuable place. The local area is vividly described there, and it explains how parts of monsters can be used. Cheerfully looking around, he put the book aside just then someone approached him. A burly-looking adventurer asked if he was the one looking for an escort mission. He sincerely explained that he was still a novice and wanted to learn from people he could trust. A man named Dean, a silver-level adventurer, introduced himself as his guide. The main character could not hide his surprise. A silver ranker took on such a simple task. Emotions overwhelmed him, and he agreed to everything planned for that day. He suddenly realized he had completely succumbed to Dean's energy. The irritated girl with 2 ponytails approached Dean and sharply told him not to decide anything on his own. Dean calmly brushed off her complaints and told her not to be picky. The main character was boiling with irritation. He suspected he would have to do that boring and annoying task again for the guild favorite. He asked them to understand that he did not want to interfere in their quarrels. The girl exploded and argued with Tyne. Their partner Chris was getting all the best assignments. From the side, she cast a pleading look at the main character. Dean angrily complained that he did not want to be tied to the guild. He stood with his arms crossed over his chest, not wanting to be attached to one partner. The girl Amel gently leaned over and asked him to help her. She explained they were brother and sister, and he spoiled them too much. Another girl appeared keen and loudly, with annoyance, named some dish. Kana calmly told Dean that everything happened because he spoiled his sister too much. She gently reminded him that he could refuse the escort offered by the guild. The main character, with a trembling voice, apologized to Kana for the awkward scene they had arranged. The phrase brothers and sisters suddenly echoed in him with unpleasant memories of his sister. I no longer need an escort, he informed the surprised Dean. But Amo completely misunderstood everything and, smiling, sincerely thanked him. She already imagined how he would find her another party, but he immediately objected. He turned back to the receptionist and simply said that he no longer needed an escort. Dean exclaimed in surprise when he suddenly changed his plans. The administrator sincerely apologized for the inconvenience and offered to return his money. He asked if instead of a refund, he could receive a guidebook for adventurers. He stepped away from the guild, and the building itself stood out clearly against the sky. Stepping onto the street, he sighed wearily, feeling relief. He resolutely decided that in this life, he would no longer endure any complicated family dramas between brothers and sisters. A light fairy tale-like voice whispered jokingly and asked why he was not taking a vacation. The goddess Misha appeared and reminded him, only he can see her. She whispered to him, remember that she and other spirits are watching over you. He wondered if she was oversimplifying everything, but she insisted, just be cautious. She teased him jokingly, saying that he might have some not very polite thoughts wandering, but he immediately denied it. He thought that if he used his ability to cut off too often, sooner or later, it would turn into a problem. The mission explained simply, these skills affect the weekends for a greater number of targets. He pondered aloud, does the power really weaken when there are more targets? She explained it affects those nearby, and they begin to avoid this topic. She winked at him a clear hint that he could use it if he remembered. He looked at her and quietly whispered, thank you for the advice. She smiled at him warmly and contentedly, glad that she could help. When she disappeared, a gentle wave of wind quietly swirled in her place. He wondered whether some god had taken an interest in him, even though he had no power. He approached the city gate preparing to set out alone to the monster forest. The guard looked at the adventurer's new token and let him pass further. He left behind the safe city walls and stepped into the wild nature. He glanced into the guidebook and read that the monster realm was right beyond the gates. He learned the creatures he would have to meet were famous for their horns. On the pages of the book lived drawings rabbits with horns and without any at all. When he finally found himself alone, he decided to test his sword. He called his weapon, and its name thundered in his head, the sword for beheading. Suddenly he remembered, his storage skill allows hiding anything but not living creatures. Suddenly something rustled in the tall grass, and he instantly became alert. He turned around and saw a large white rabbit coming out of the bushes. The rabbit froze, its nose barely twitching. It was looking at him. He relaxed for a moment because he decided that before him was just an ordinary animal. Suddenly the rabbit's face twisted with anger, and it lunged at him. Wow, he exclaimed, jumping back from the creature's furious attack. He noticed dark horns around the eyes, small, like beans. Suddenly he realized, before him was a hornless monster. He swung the sword instinctively. The blade hit the target with a dull thud. His eyes widened with surprise when he saw how easily and quickly his strike worked. With one precise strike, and he defeated this creature. He paused for a moment and imagined how an ordinary sword from a shop would behave. Another rabbit perished in an instant from his sword. Suddenly he realized that even an ordinary sword would be enough for this horned enemy. He looked into the forest and suddenly felt a new confidence being born within him. He found several plants and, using his skill, recognized which herbs they were. He came across wild raspberries, and he laughed with joy. The forest turned out to be generous. He thought with pleasure how useful his skills are. Near the tree trunk, his attention was drawn by a magic vortex. He recognized these mushrooms, the very ones he had seen on the island. His evaluation skill confirmed that they were edible, and this made him even sadder. Suddenly he was overwhelmed by sharp anxiety, and he instantly became alert. He felt nearby something terrifying, a creature much bigger than a rabbit. He turned sharply, and shock froze on his face. Suddenly, a huge bear with horns growled at him from the forest. The horned bear rose on its hind legs and growled threateningly. His eyes widened in shock. A large horned monster loomed before him. Above this whole place hung a dense forest canopy. He looked around the clearing and was still trying to understand what had just happened. He looked at the fallen bear and could not believe that the power of his sword could be so terrible. Suddenly, the goddess Misha appeared and asked why he was not using magic. He sharply scolded her for the surprise, and she only laughed and sweetly apologized. He admitted that he had forgotten about magic because he thought he no longer needed it. Miss Hutes winked and advised trying to look for monsters without leaving home. She smiled and suggested he check how well he could explore something new. He suddenly realized there were so many new abilities that he didn't even have time to comprehend them all. He focused deeply and for the first time used the skill exploration. A targeting mark suddenly appeared in his field of vision. It precisely aimed at a distant rabbit. With bitter regret, he realized everything would have been much easier if he had used this earlier. Misha asked which magic he would use, and this made him clarify what abilities he had. She joyfully listed the divine elemental powers that he could now use. Suddenly, a horned rabbit jumped out of the bushes and rushed at him. He closed his eyes, concentrated, and imagined exactly which spell he wanted to create. He sharply thrust his hand forward, and a powerful gust blade burst from it. The invisible wind, like a sword, struck the rabbit, and it instantly fell unconscious. He looked at his hand in surprise and realized the magic really worked. Next to him lay the defeated rabbit. He turned to Miss Hutka and, sincerely grateful, thanked her for the help. She whispered to him, "Be careful, there are almost no mages left. They have become a real rarity." As soon as he used his skill to preserve the carcasses, a small whirlwind spun around. Having brought all his catch to the city gates, he decided to sell it. He wondered what is the most convenient way to deliver his huge trophy to the guild. He came to a large wooden building, the purchasing point. He approached the counter and politely asked the man to appraise his goods. The seller froze in shock when he dropped the huge bag with the goods. The man said that his strength was simply incredible. It did not at all match how he looked. He remembered how carefully he disassembled these creatures before bringing them. The seller led him to the storeroom, and their carcasses of monsters hung everywhere. He clearly felt that it was precisely the skill of mental resilience that allowed him to calmly look at this terrible sight. He remembered that even simply cleaning fish on the island was the height of his abilities. The man proudly boasted about the strength of his hands and how well he processed leather. He refused to go to the Adventurers Guild, even when they offered him a much higher salary. A gloomy expression appeared on his face as soon as he recalled that chaotic adventurous period with his sister and brother. Then, with hope in his voice, he asked the seller where he could learn to brew potions. The man explained how the guild system works and without hesitation offered to sell a recipe. The boy agreed to the deal. It became clear to him what the man was offering. He held in his hands the newly obtained potion recipe, written in some foreign, completely unfamiliar letters. He was quite surprised. Recipes for various dishes from Cork are now even easier to find. After reviewing the instructions, he thought, brewing potions is surprisingly simple. He decided that brewing potions was the perfect way to hide his healing abilities. He was already about to leave when the seller suddenly called out to him. The man asked with interest if he had come across a magic stone and offered to appraise it. His eyes suddenly widened with surprise. He remembered how they had previously talked about magical stones. The man was clutching a small red stone in his palm, in which the crystallized soul of a monster was frozen. He recognized it as a valuable red spinel, and, shining with admiration, congratulated him on such a find. The boy, who at first thought it was just a stone, whispered a confused thank you. The man offered to buy it, saying that the item had great potential for powerful fire magic. He instantly agreed to sell it. Why keep it when he could use magic without it? When dusk covered the city, the half-timbered houses of Kasamu were plunged into shadow. He decided to take a walk around the city and quickly grab a bite before evening came. He walked the streets, carefully observing all the new and unusual things around him. He found himself at a bustling evening market where everything was teeming with life. His gaze was instantly caught by stalls piled high with mountains of cheese heads. Other sellers offered dried salami and long bundles of appetizing sausages. He saw hearty sandwiches filled with something that looked like finely chopped cabbage. He noticed bread with sauerkraut, sausage, ham, and cheese they ate often. He put his evaluation skill into action and carefully examined the grilled sausages. He decided that these dishes were excellently prepared and ordered one from the seller. He gladly bit off a large piece of the freshly grilled hot sausage. He sincerely believed that fatty, high-calorie food was the best fuel for adventures. His gaze caught on boxes filled with various dried fruits. Out of curiosity, he bought a small packet, took a piece out, and put it into his mouth. He sharply shuddered from surprise and exclaimed, "This is incredibly sour." He understood this was probably an ingredient for sweets or tasty meat dishes. He noticed a woman at another stall. She was selling something that resembled brown sugar. The retro scales she used seemed to enchant him. The strong smell of alcohol made him wonder from what age is it officially allowed to drink here. He continued walking through the lively market, feeling simple, sincere joy. Suddenly something buzzed ahead, instantly catching his attention. He wondered what had happened there. He stretched his neck and looked intently, trying to see where the sudden commotion had come from. He froze, seeing a whole huge pig roasting on a large fire. His eyes lit up with admiration when he saw this impressive culinary spectacle. He watched in fascination as the vendor skillfully sliced juicy meat for sandwiches. He gladly bought himself a freshly made sandwich with roasted pork. He held a large sandwich in his hands and couldn't help thinking how appetizing it was. He eagerly bit off a big piece, and the taste instantly exploded in his mouth. Chewing with pleasure, he said he had definitely found a winner. He was enjoying savoring the juicy pork and was already imagining how he would cook the same at home. He raised his eyes to the starry sky and decided that he would come for the pig another time. Later that night, his large house stood silently under the starry sky. Returning home, he quietly greeted the sleeping curly Rish lying in the basket. He thought that since living on the island, his belly seemed to have become smaller. He enthusiastically told the spirit how successfully he had hunted and earned well that day. Rich responded to his voice with a quiet, sleepy squeak. When he reached for Rich, a soft, warm light shone from his palm. He knew Hai's healing spells were powerless if her magical strength was gone. He quietly wished for the little weak spirit to recover as soon as possible. Preparing for sleep, he gently whispered goodnight to his new, peaceful home. The next morning, a bright sun rose, its rays piercing through the tree branches. He sat down at the table and began the usual traditional breakfast: fish, rice, and soup. During the procession, he noticed that the fabric of the clothing turned out to be of poor quality. He decided that he wanted to use his language knowledge to read local books. With a smile, he decided to set off to the capital today. When he arrived, he was stunned with amazement. The capital was incredibly large. He approached the city guard and explained that he was here for the first time. The guard kindly handed him a simple, folded map of the city. The guard warned the trade guild might try to take advantage of him. The city watch thinks that the child playing in the square might give directions. He thanked the guard and bought from him a map of this wonderful royal city. He was already leaving when the guard called him back one last time. The guard advised a useful way to find a guide in the city. Surprised by such kindness, Jean sincerely thanked the guard once again for his advice. He set off for the capital, sincerely hoping not to get into trouble in this new city for him. He noticed that the buildings in the city stood too close together, as if there was not enough space. With a map in his hands, he finally reached the central square he was looking for. Suddenly, the guard's advice came to his mind. Near the well, look for a man named Leon. His eye caught a man with a long tail sitting on the edge of the well. Carefully, he approached this man and asked, "Is your name really Leon?" The hostile reaction of this man suddenly made him jump back in surprise and fear. Leon glanced at him with an angry, threatening look. Strong irritation was visible in his eyes. The man sharply and rudely stated his name, and his aggressive voice terribly frightened Jean. Fear gripped him so much that he barely whispered, "Show me the city." He said that it was the city guard who advised him to turn to him. Leon became even angrier when he found out that the boy was sent by the guard. He suddenly wondered, was he deceived, or maybe this was not the person at all? Leon sighed heavily and reluctantly agreed, deciding that this was his fate. They walked side by side, and Jean asked with interest if there were any important places worth seeing here. Lan always said that the best view in the entire capital opens from the castle. But he immediately emphasized, ordinary people are forbidden here, entering the castle grounds is not allowed. John did not understand, why recommend a place where one is not allowed to enter? Then he asked to recommend a few shops or places where one can eat deliciously. Leon's face suddenly became serious. He remembered that he had to get to a famous restaurant. John could not understand why his simple questions so upset the guides. They walked along the cobblestone street, and their footsteps echoed in the alley. During the tour, Jean suddenly noticed something unusual in the city. He, full of surprise, asked, "Why are all the houses standing so close to each other?" Then he, with curiosity in his eyes, asked what exact taxes the citizens have to pay. Leon simply and ruthlessly named the tax on citizens, the tax on transport, and even the strange tax on glass. The tax on glass was introduced because windows were then a luxury that only the rich could afford. Suddenly he realized that he had almost never noticed glass windows and simply did not use them. He pointed to a huge building and learned that it was a church for spirits. Inside the courtyard shone a beautiful fountain, a place where spirits gather. He suddenly felt that in this country spirits are honored just like gods. Suddenly Leon froze and for a moment plunged into thoughts. He apologized and sincerely admitted that he should have shown Jean the most interesting tourist places. Seeing this kinder side in him, Jane thought that her guide was not so bad after all. But even the simplest compliments again drive Leon out of himself. His voice was low and threatening, and he threw the phrase, "young master," with obvious mockery. Suddenly, an elegantly dressed elderly man appeared and addressed Leon as if he had known him for a long time. Jean looked at the newcomer with interest, trying to guess who this respectable man was. He noticed the man's formal attire and wondered why he called Leon young master. Leon explained that Notes served as a butler for the entire Adelheid family. Then he asked in surprise, why did the butler suddenly appear in the square? Notes, with a stone-faced expression, informed that a hired assassin was hunting Leon. A woman in uniform approached them and strongly advised them to leave the city immediately. Leon recognized the woman. It was Lily's, and in this confusion, another person appeared. She pointed to the carriage that was already waiting and firmly insisted that they flee right now. But Leon stood his ground, stubbornly refusing to run from danger. The butler, with calm in his voice, explained the escape as a smart and well-thought-out retreat. When her patience ran out, Lily's grabbed Leon by the hand and sharply pulled him towards the carriage. She struck him in the stomach with the hilt of her sword. In a flash, he fell to the ground. Leon, gasping for breath, stopped and said sadly that they were wasting precious time. For a moment, Lilith shuddered with regret for her harsh but forced action. She, with a trembling voice, asked why they were not using potions to heal him. Jean saw that Leon was still writhing in pain. He was completely confused, caught up in some story he did not understand at all. Lily's noticed that more people had gathered around and called everyone to hurry so as not to attract unnecessary attention. Standing by the carriage, John suddenly realized he had to help. He handed the wounded Leon and his friends his own homemade tincture. It was only a prototype, but his evaluation skills clearly confirmed that it could be used safely. Lily looked at the strange boy and asked, who is he and why did he help? He called himself Jean and succinctly said that he was just looking around the city. Note explained to Lilicy that they are now going to the store. Lily's was turning the new information over in her head, trying to understand what was happening. She decisively grabbed Jean by the wrist and pulled him toward the carriage that was already waiting. Jean carefully give Levon the potion in the carriage while he groans in pain. Levon drank the healing liquid from the vial in one sharp gulp. The potion worked quickly, and the pain on his face slowly receded. Shin watched with trembling as his heart wildly pounded, hoping the potion would work as it should. Having recovered, Levon sincerely thanked Jean for coming at the right moment. Jean only wanted to be let go. He no longer mentioned the purchases. Levon lowered his gaze, still feeling pain after the strong blow. Embarrassed, he whispered, "Where are we?" And the note coldly explained that they are inside. He fervently assured that during the exile, he did nothing that would force him to flee. Lily's confessed the danger arose because of his younger brother. It seems his brother did something again, and this made everything even more complicated. Jean was completely confused, trying to untangle all the family problems. Not advised his master to retreat, and not hiding his curiosity, asked why he decided to become a guide. Finally, the carriage stopped near a beautiful, elegant building. Not suddenly urgently called his young master, addressing him by a different name. They went to the tailor, and Leon immediately asked for new clothes. He apologized to Joan for their excursion being interrupted so suddenly and rudely. John hurried everyone, while Leon looked calm and relied on the tailor. Lilith had already met Jean. Once then she told her about her noble origin. She gave him a ring as a keepsake and advised him to stay away for now. He accepted the ring, not knowing what awaited him ahead, along with new acquaintances. Finally he asked, why is Adelheid called Young Lord, although it is a male title? Adelheid dramatically revealed the truth. In fact, she is a woman. This news struck John. He simply froze, so shocked that he could not utter a word. Adelheid explained with regret, because of boyish behavior and small breasts, she is often mistaken. One last cunning glance in Lilith left the store. The note quietly apologizes for the inconvenience and assures that this clothing is a gift for him. Left alone in the luxurious store, he looked around carefully and wondered what kind of clothes are sold here. The maids instantly rushed to him, ready to take his individual order. He realized this is not just a clothing store, but a real atelier with expensive items. After trying on clothes, he was completely exhausted. Finding a quiet alley, he decided it was time to leave the city forever. After a long day, Yen activates his storage skill and hides all his purchases. He bought sheets, a bedspread, and books, and then decided to eat before the excursion. He sits at the table and enjoys a simple but tasty dinner, meat and bread. Later, he finds a cozy corner in the library and settles down to start studying. When he approaches his gigantic stone mansion, he loudly announces his return. Inside, he sees his spirit wolf Rish and gently strokes his back while he sleeps. Standing by the basket, Rish decides that it's time to get to his new books. He settles by the window and tries hard to read in the dim candlelight. As it gets dark, he feels that the candlelight is not enough to see anything. He plans to make a good lamp, thinking about what fuel to use and which reflective materials to apply. Suddenly, a goddess appears and reproaches him. He forgot about his own abilities. She tells him, just imagine the needed magic, and he raises his finger. He focuses on the word light, and suddenly a glowing sphere materializes before him. He exclaims excitedly how convenient it is to use this magical light for reading. He recalls the eventful day and feels a quiet, warm satisfaction from the achieved results. He remembers the noble Adelheim with a stern face, whom he met earlier. He does not know what happened to her, but mentally prays that she is well. Several months have passed, and his companion Rish is peacefully dozing in his basket. The little spirit wolf suddenly wakes up, his eyes wide open and shining with new strength. Rish has fully recovered, and now happily walks through the forest alongside Jean. Jean is so proud of his homemade preserves, it is clear that he is becoming increasingly independent. For several months now, he has immersed himself in local crafts, making cheese and woodworking. With the onset of winter, he plans to build a separate cabin where he will brew his potions. While working, he notices a tiny plant, and it unexpectedly reminds him of something from the past. Suddenly, he remembers the purchased cork oak seedling and decides the time has come to plant it. He gently plants the small sprout into the soft soil. Without hesitation, he decides to use the gift from Miss Shoot, a magical powder that accelerates growth. He gently sprinkles the sparkling powder on the newly planted sprout. Suddenly, a loud crack sounded. The plant instantly began to grow at a furious speed. The Jinn watches with admiration as the sprout rapidly grows before his eyes. He looks up with admiration at the large mature tree towering above him. He remembered how he had already used this powerful powder for the grapevine arch, and the result was stunning. He suddenly notices that this tree is perfect for his plans and decides to use it later. Soon he returns to the familiar, lively border town of Kassam. Tired of living in hotels, he finally decided, it's time to rent a proper house here. During a walk, he suddenly notices a handkerchief lying on the cobblestones. He raises his gaze and sees a traveler having lunch. It's her again, he thought. He suddenly remembered, lately she was known primarily as the one who trades herbs. He simply decides to ignore her and walks past without uttering a single word. He understands, buying tools without local registration would look suspicious. After this meeting, he had no doubts left. He now definitely decided to rent a house. The realtor leads him to a house in a narrow alley surrounded by cold stone walls. The agent enthusiastically explains that this new house is inexpensive and located in a safe area. Jin notices that in this world old, sturdily built houses often turn out to be better. He tells the agent that he takes this house and is already thinking about how to help with repairs. He fully immerses himself in polishing his new skills and first tries his hand at cheese making. Then he takes on plastering and carefully applies the mixture to the stone wall. A chill runs down his spine as if someone is watching him, and a man peeks out from behind the corner. Distant snowy mountain peaks seem to whisper that a new season is approaching. John feels the cold, and someone else from the townspeople complains about the chill. He hears someone nearby lamenting they are running out of money. He tries to pass by her, sincerely hoping to avoid another exhausting conversation. She calls him and hurriedly runs after him as he walks away. She asks if he is going to the forest and warns about the tricks of winter. He warmly thanks her for her care and quietly says he knows about all the risks. She firmly grabs his hand and insists his life is more important than any money. He confidently tells her he is not acting recklessly, and his stern tone catches her by surprise. She sharply steps back a step and loudly screams as if she stumbled. She sits on the ground, winks, and says, "I just tripped." Tears in her eyes, and she tries hard to convincingly pretend clumsiness. Jean walks away, wondering, why do her frank attempts to manipulate him not work at all? When he approaches the city gates, suddenly someone jumps out and blocks his way. He freezes in surprise, seeing before him Amel's brother Dean. Now the brother is preparing for another conversation, or is he already gearing up for a possible argument? Dean immediately recognizes him from that first, somewhat stormy meeting in the Adventurers Guild. He sincerely apologizes, clasping his hands in front of him and openly showing his guilt. Dean says that their partner, Kina, strictly scolded him. He admits that their actions took away the truly interesting adventure from the guild. Jean listens silently and understands. Dean at least realized his mistake. Dean confesses, although it was all because of food, she did not want anything bad at all. Jean agrees to accept his apology but adds, there is one condition. Dean looks confused and asks, what condition can I name? John sternly tells Dean, don't let your sister get close to him anymore. Dean reluctantly agrees, and hesitation is still audible in his voice. Then he asked Gina if she was sure, and began boasting about how cute his sister is. Jean is simply shocked by how obsessed this man is with his sister. He directly tells Dean that such behavior looks strange, it's not his style at all. He imagines the ideal partner. He thinks this person should be calm and reserved, like Adelheid. He thinks again, a little self-confidence is good. Dean suddenly changes the subject, and with a slight smile, offers to show him where the rare herb grows. Jean immediately became interested. He was just about to go gather herbs. Dean smiles and gives a thumbs up. It's clear he is pleased they agreed. Jean imagines Dean as an ordinary guy, if not for his obsession with his sister. They walk together into the green thicket bathed in sunlight. Dean points to the plant. Its long leaves resemble blades. He instantly recognizes, this is kimchi grass, what the rich often add to flavor their wine. Jean asks with curiosity if it has an earthy taste, and Dean grimaces. He finds the idea disgusting. Dean suggests catching a few rabbits and whipping up a meal from them. Jean understands, as long as Dean is nearby, using his magic of transmission or preservation is impossible. They roasted pieces of rabbit meat on skewers over a well-lit campfire. At the table, Jean praises Dean for his enthusiasm and skillful fighting style. Dean jokes Jean is so strong, she could hunt bears and make a living from it. Jean modestly responds to the compliment, saying he acts only by the strength of his hands. Dean looks at him with distrust, not understanding where he gets such strength. Jean promises himself someday he will become bigger and stronger. The smile on Dean's face suddenly faded, and his expression became serious as he watched Jean. Suddenly he lunges forward and pins Jean to the ground. He cannot help but notice that Jean's legs are as powerful as his hands. Suddenly their fight is stopped by a calm voice. Adele, Haiti emerges from behind the trees. Jean and Dean look up, immediately shocked by her unexpected appearance. Gina freezes. She recognizes Lyra and wonders how she got here. She calmly says as if it's no big deal. She is hunting a bear and just decided to rest a bit and drink some water. Jean understands revealing his name now would be a big mistake. Dean asked if they know each other, and Jean only nodded, confirming it. She says her name is Ash and asks to be called that. Dean says his name, and Gina realizes with relief how good it is that she invented a pseudonym. Ash promises to pay him back for the potion, but he just shrugs and says it doesn't matter. Dean cheerfully hands her a skewer with hot, uneven meatballs. He smiles broadly, insisting, just eat it already, don't worry. That unexpected trio settles near a small fire, right on the very shore of the body of water. Dean Boz from Bear Hunt will pay for the potion, and then, frowning, will ask why her hotel is so expensive. Gina was surprised. The fee 1 gold coin per day is too expensive. They ask where she lives, and she answers simply, I only have a room with a bed. She explains the guild receptionist with pink hair advised her Spartan accommodation. Both Jean and Dean instantly imagine a bright but problematic amulet. Dean fervently defends his sister, and without hesitation blames the hotel for all the troubles. Jean irritably notes, as soon as the conversation turns to his sister, Dean completely loses logic. He says he constantly worries, so he helps others, and tenderly calls food sweet girl. Delhade Cully watches carefully and realizes, right now they are choosing food for his younger sister. Dean shudders. Her always stern facial expression scares him. She tells something incredible. A spirit was swirling near a meal. She explains, on Dean's forehead there is now a mark left by the spirit. Dean is confused and does not understand what is meant, and asks what she means. He sees nothing. John was sure, if there really is a spirit here, he will see it immediately. Suddenly on Dean's head, as if from nothing, a delicate white flower sprouts. Jean puffs his cheeks, trying not to laugh. He says to the confused Dean, don't look at me so seriously. He carefully examines this flower and thinks it looks artificial. Apologizing, Jean reaches out to that strange flower growing on Dean's head. With a sharp movement, he tears the tiny flower from its unexpected hiding place. Barely had they taken the flower, Dean's eyes rolled back. Dean collapses to the ground, and Jean instantly apologizes. Delhade explains that the spirit's influence has finally been broken, and it seems Jean notices this. He firmly says that he can, and at that moment his thoughts drift to Rish's spiritual partner. Rich sees the spirit. Its influence usually suppresses Jean, so that everything is normal. She is stunned. She knows that only her father used this place, and begins to suspect that something is passed down the bloodline here. She says that out of the whole family, only she and her dad see them. She warns him to be careful. There are many around who want to seize his unique abilities. John nods with anxiety on his face. He agrees to heed her important warning. Jean Glance looks at the unconscious Dean and decides, for now, he must be forced to keep silent. He thinks that if they leave him, it will be funny after all. He told nothing and revealed no secrets. Asha asks with a trembling voice, was he worried that her true identity might be revealed? She asked if Dean was his friend. He admitted that this was only their second meeting. A shadow appeared on Adelaida's face. She froze, shocked and stunned by what she heard. Stun grips her. She realizes that she thinks exactly the same as Jones. She wearily presses her hand to her forehead and realizes that she herself was mistaken. Jean looks at her and mentally tells himself, she is like a person to whom luck never smiles. While they sit by the fire, Jean suddenly decides to bring up a new topic. She asks if he sees her soul, and he, seemingly embarrassed, asks again which one exactly she means. A little bird lands on her head and persistently starts pecking. Jean could hardly believe how firmly the little bird had attached itself to him. While the bird relentlessly does its job, he asks if it is a dull, constant pain. He asks if it hurts her, and she calmly replies that she has already gotten used to the egg. He thinks that even the sharp prick from pecking eventually becomes familiar and almost unnoticeable. Jean Lin intently looks at the tiny chick perched on her head. He notices a strange stripe of light, like a glowing ring, encircling the bird's neck. He intently gazes at the creature and activates his unique ability to evaluate. The result shows the spirit wants to make her brave, and this astonishes him. He asks why she endured all this for so long and what the meaning of it was. She says that it is necessary for her to grow into a good heiress, and he immediately asks if she has a brother. She says that when she was born, her father was drunk, and John misunderstood this amusingly. In their family, martial skill was above all, so the father gave her the spirit of strength. He finds this story strange, and he skeptically asks, is strength all that makes a man real? She stands confused and admits she does not know the specific details of the contract. He advises to release the spirit because it seems to be suffering. Delhade lowers her eyes and quietly, almost in a whisper, agrees with his assessment of the situation. She admits with a quiet smile, actually, this was supposed to be released 2 years ago, but the mage got sick. She turns back to him, and hope trembles in her voice as she asks if he can free it. He is sure that he can handle the collar, and suggests trying it out immediately in the city. She, filled with gratitude, agrees and promises a reward regardless of how it all ends. He asks why she has no money, and she calmly replies that she will go hunting for a bear. Suddenly he remembers, her main goal here is to hunt a bear. A loud, sincere voice burst out from the clearing. He was apologizing. Dean regains consciousness and apologizes, while Adelhade quietly explains that he was simply enchanted. He realizes that the glowing spirit mark, affected most strongly those who were closest to the ammunition. Dean apologizes once again, but Jean says, "Don't worry about it now." Dean energetically talks about his plan to move the mill to the Spirit Branch to contain the chaos. Jean recalled how he once searched for such a place himself and asked if there was anything similar nearby. Delhade frankly admits that she knows little, so she suggests just listening for now. Spirit branches are special spots, varying in size, where spirits can rest and find peace. Dean says, "I need to return to the city immediately to organize everything." Jean suggests calling a transport service for the bear, and Dean realizes with surprise he is hearing about such a service for the first time. Ash explains that it is a service for adventurers that helps them carry heavy loot. He hands her a note with the trip details, and she accepts it gratefully. Jean pauses for a moment and adds one more important condition. Dean Wing shows a thumbs up and, smiling, sincerely promises to keep Jean's secret confidential. Jean says goodbye, feeling that Dean guessed he touched the ghost's mark. Adelhaida, like lightning, draws her sword and prepares for battle. Jean instantly catches her rhythm. The sword in his hand gleams. He is ready for battle. The big wolf falls to the ground. Their quick strikes defeated it. She enthusiastically praises him for his effective fighting style, and he modestly accepts the compliment. He says that he is merely repeating her professional technique, but doing it with his own skills. The driver shouts, insisting that this cargo is simply impossible to transport. The driver can no longer endure this and says that the rest should be carried by themselves. From behind, it is clearly visible how the cart bends under the weight of all their cargo. Although they failed to catch the bear, Adelhaide noted that the wolf hunt brought considerable profit. She sincerely apologizes for the inconvenience, and he does not even mind. He likes the challenge itself. Adelhaide's heart tightens. Dean may remain unconscious for several more days. Jean looks around and asks, where is her faithful servant? She additionally informs about another task and notes that Jean is quite a demanding leader. Stay at my house, Jean Adelhaide suggested. Everything now takes place in his spacious wooden house, which he rents in Kasumi. Inside, he smiled, warmly greeted her, and invited her to sit on the chair nearby. Later, Adelhaide noted that he really has good taste after all. He repaired the old house so wonderfully. A light wild scent of forest wolves, coming from her clothes, touched his nose. He thought aloud what to do about bathing, and decided to ask her. He promised to prepare everything for her, and asked to wait just a little. Standing by the well, he decisively refused the steam bath, considering it unhygienic. A hot bath was already waiting, enticingly calling near the crackling fireplace. From the stairs, he said the bath was ready. She smiled and thanked him. He decided not to waste time to change clothes and prepare the guest bed. Climbing the stairs, he suddenly thought how wonderful it would be to have a bath. Then on the small table appeared a teapot with tea and several treats. On the table, like a quiet witness, a metal teapot gleamed, ready for their important conversation. Jin asked if it was time to start opening the ceiling. The renewed, adult Hyde nodded in response. When he came closer, she told him she was relying on him. He narrowed his eyes and, concentrating intensely, took on the difficult task. The little bird spirit Rue incessantly pecked Adelgaide on the temple. Adelgaide whispered that the bird would not stop pecking her. He understood. He needed to remove the bright light circlet from her neck. Suddenly the bird puffed up its chest and shone with excited energy. The creature howled in despair and, thanks to the spirit's power, Adelhaide achieved victory. He apologized when he saw how, shocked, she suddenly slumped forward. He exclaimed in surprise and caught her at the very moment she fainted. Her hand, which was clutching her chest, fell weakly. When he embraced her, he noticed with surprise that her chest was completely flat. He carefully laid her on the bed and whispered, calling to her. He stood in doubt, should he stop her on the path to avenging her father. He gently spoke to the tired little bird, telling it that it too should rest a little. Adelhaide was peacefully sleeping, nestled against the very same pillow nearby. John looked at them and thought. The ceiling dismantling went surprisingly quickly. He decided not to leave while she was sleeping. He arranged the third floor for her. He set about preparing, stacking books and everything necessary. He brought a tray with a drink so that if she woke up and wanted to drink, everything would be at hand. He worked tirelessly to make the home even cozier. Returning to his estate, he called his faithful spirit wolf Rish. He apologized to the happy wolf for having paid little attention to him lately. He warmly scratched Rish's fluffy cheeks while the wolf gently licked his hand. Only Kasem was spinning again in his head. Adelhaide still showed no sign that she was about to open up. Suddenly he felt a powerful, divine presence behind his back. With Vali together with the god Vafon, the mission of the goddess also appeared. Jean froze in shock and asked tremblingly, why did the gods suddenly come to his home? Cheerfully, without ceremony, they said they had a request for him. Val asked if he would agree to name the spirits that fled there. Miss had bitterly explained that his sister recklessly uses magic and does not notice them. The court stated that her stubbornness has only been causing problems for a year. He added that she subjugates the spirits, but all this is only because she has become too confident in her power. John repeated the name of his sister Namina, and it sounded unusual to him. He suddenly realized that they were talking about that ball of light that was summoned during the ritual. He was once again convinced that he did not love her when he saw how she relentlessly gained more and more power. Miss Hit was worried. When Namina learns to see the spirits, she will begin to control them. Vafon incessantly complained that this constant noise of the spirits was simply unbearable. Val cried he understood. If he told everyone about the hero's deeds, it would have great consequences. Jean asked what effect it would have. Misha only replied, "See for yourself." She pointed with her hand at the window, letting him understand that he needed to look outside. He closed his eyes for a moment, gathering courage before what he might see. When he looked out the window, his eyes suddenly opened wide. Behind the glass, a creepy flock of small, glowing spirits had gathered. He exhaled in shock and asked, "Are they all ghosts?" It was too much for him. He suddenly realized that all this time he had lived next to them, remaining unnoticed, and that was even better. Miss Hud said that they were attracted by his power and asked what he should do next. Val said that by giving them names, they would be able to break free from his sister's control. At first, the spirits chose him. He was naughty even before he was tamed. Confused, he asked if he could even name so many. Fafon suggested using numbers and said that later he could rename them if he wanted. By the way, spirits sometimes receive new names from those who like them. Jean wondered how everything is arranged with the spirits. Is there someone they love more than him? Fafon told him that the spirits' names would give him strength, and Jean understood. Miss had said it was better to start on the street spirits cannot get there. She quietly asked the spirits to line up so that each, in turn, could be given a name for their peaceful life. Sitting at the table, Jordan began naming their new names one by one. He continued listing them, loudly naming each by color and number. After an hour, he was already standing by the yellow 52, but the line still stretched on as if endless. Exhausted, he simply collapsed on the table and groaned that he urgently needed a break. A small spirit came down and cheekily poked him in the cheek. He suddenly stood up sharply and blurted out that he had to go check on Esh. He activated his teleportation ability and swiftly escaped from all duties. He appeared in the room again and quietly sighed with relief. He thought he had already escaped, but suddenly saw the goddess Miss Hut was waiting for him. He asked in surprise if she had been following him, and she only laughed in response. As soon as he approached the bed, a small bird spirit flew up to him. Misha finally confirmed. The little bird really was a spirit, just as he had suspected. Jin explained the person on the bed was Adelheid, also called Ash. He told me that she suddenly fainted at the very moment he was trying to free the spirit. Suddenly the goddess looked at him, deep concern spread in her eyes. She, overwhelmed with emotions, stated that this was her first time and it was a very difficult situation. Hovering over the bed, she again dramatically repeated her loud statement. John was stunned when he realized Misha really sees Adelheid as a woman. Misha accuses him, says that he is a bad person and wants to take advantage of her. She cheerfully waved her finger as if saying, "You are mistaken." She gently placed her hands on Adelheid's forehead and blessed her. She assured that after her intervention, everything would be fine with Adelheid. She reassured John that everything would be fine with Adelheid, and he immediately felt great relief. She calmed him. Don't worry, she thinks that Adelheid will wake up the next night. Misha couldn't stand it and asked him, what is the name of the spirit of that little bird? He suddenly remembered. Thanks to his ability to assess, he determined that her name is Rue. He explained the old contract is no longer valid, so a new one can be made. Misha told him that the little spirit wants him to come up with a name for it. For a moment he imagined a fluffy Chan because of its soft feathers, but quickly dismissed the thought. He looked more closely, noticed its beautiful blue feathers, and pondered. Searching for the perfect name, Jean asked the little spirit, "How about Ace?" The little bird gently nestled against his cheek, as if whispering that it immediately liked the new name. He smiles and says that he took this name from the Italian word meaning blue color. The newcomer chirps happily, as if asking to stay. Jean looks at the sleeping Adelheid and suddenly realizes how much it will hurt her to miss her old friend. He decides to return to work and, glancing at Miss Hut, asks if he should take up this topic again. Using his ability to teleport, he returns home to his estate under the starry sky. He was stunned to see that the gods Hackley and Rudil were also waiting for him. Sitting at his desk, he begins the difficult and long task of naming the spirits. Finally, he finishes, and then he is told that the gods will return if more appear. Feeling a surge of strength, he rushes to cast the spell of light, but Adelheid stops him and says, "Wait." It is already too late. A dazzling white flame bursts in his hand, blinding everything. He screams in pain, pressing his hands to his eyes. The unbearably bright light of his own magic blinds him. Adelheid throws an irritated glance at him and reminds him that she clearly asked him to wait. Adding darkness to the spell, she tells him, "Now looking is safe." Mishad says that true power was born when all the light spirits he mentioned united their gratitude. Goddess Val warns him he must learn to control his power, because without a clear understanding it can prove too dangerous. Shyly recalling Misha's advice to imagine magic, he suddenly realizes he was wrong. Suddenly his stomach loudly roared, breaking that tense moment. He mumbles to himself, probably time for dinner already. He turns around and sees the entire pantheon of DAD is watching him attentively, all holding their breath, waiting for his reaction. Pretending to be a hospitable host, he asks with a tired, barely noticeable smile if they will stay for lunch. The gods immediately began loudly demanding different food. Someone shouted, "Bring honey," while someone else asked only for salt. He creates a simple but very tasty dish, baked fish in a hearty broth with hearty pork. Having tasted the warm soup, he quietly whispered that it was very tasty. He looks away from his bowl and watches with interest the amazing guests sitting with him at the table. The goddesses Miss Hut and Harolfa calmly and elegantly savor honey and wine. The elder gods, Hekel and Val, enjoy simple bread and tea with a quiet smile. John cannot help but wonder how strange and unreal this situation is. The young god Raudil enjoys eating salt from a spoon and says it has a special taste. Jin, with a trembling voice, narrows his eyes and asks as if, "Are you really okay if you only eat salt?" This strange food suddenly made him think, can spirits even eat at all? Imagine spirits who look like humans can eat, but the taste of food is empty for them and they do not feel it. She explains that they like to feel the morning dew and breathe in the scent of flowers. As soon as Jin thinks about this, his inner wolf immediately emerges, as if begging for a piece. He gently scolds the fluffy one, quietly explaining to wait until he finishes eating. Fafan looks at Rish and chills the soul with the revelation. This little spirit was once his mighty master. Jean froze, looking at Rish's eyes, full of surprise and confusion from that unexpected news. Meshat laughs and says that the old version looks stern, but this new one is really very cute. She apologizes and, barely holding back excitement, admits that she still somewhat suspects the true nature of the spirit. The sudden change of tone completely confused John. The god tells about Rich's tragic past, once a powerful and destructive god who could shake the very earth. Before being defeated, the spirit was arrogant. He destroyed everyone who stood in the way of his selfish desires. Jean was petrified with surprise, looked at that fluffy creature and blurted out, "This is an alpha dog." The goddess Miss Hedi looks confused. The concept of alpha is completely foreign to her. He explains that alpha is the leader of the pack and emotionally explains why such relationships in a group can be harmful. He adds, to live like a human, you must respect the established order of things. Gali reminds him, Rish is not an ordinary wolf, but a spirit. Jin asks if there really is a big difference between someone who loves wolves and someone who admires spirits, and in response hears only thick, cold silence. Gal throws a stern warning. Rish is very smart and stubborn, he must not be underestimated. Jean just looks at Rish and thinks, whatever he had in the past, now he is so sweet. Misha tells him to be careful, and he smiles and sincerely thanks her for her constant care and warnings. She squeezes his hands, calls him her precious man, and with a slight smile says that this adventurous charm suits him so well. When the gods begin to disappear, Mishad wholeheartedly says their last, "Thank you." She asked him to continue taking care of the spirits, and he silently agreed. Only then they disappeared. For a moment in the whisper of the quiet night, only he and the god Vakfen remain. At the end, Buffin gently strokes Rish, calling her a proud wolf, and also leaves. Buffin disappears in a pillar of divine light, and Jin Lone is left alone in his estate. Jin thoughtfully repeats the words of the god to himself, intently replaying the phrase, proud wolf, in his mind. Rish instantly rolls onto his back, cutely showing his belly and playfully posing. Jin decides that today's adventures are enough, so he goes to take a bath and fall into bed. The next day he set off through the lively streets of the city, which is famous for its potters. He enters a shop to order a set of special signs. While he waits, his gaze stops on a beautiful tea set, and he decides to buy new dishes. He comes to the workshop of the potter Malcolm. Here stand huge street kilns. He greets the master with a smile and shows his idea for a new bathtub. Malcolm replies that he himself has been thinking about a new product design. Jean falls silent, listening carefully, holding tightly in his hands a scroll with his detailed plans. Malcolm enthusiastically talks about a timely request from a noble person from a neighboring country, the Starling Zone. The nobleman asks for a clawfoot bathtub, and Jean immediately understands it's his sister's party. Malcolm eagerly asked him for help, and Jean agreed, deciding that it was better to cooperate. Leaving the workshop, he wonders how his past again and again finds its way to him. He returns to the rented house in Kasama to visit his guest and find out how he is after the illness. Inside, Adelheid begins to wake up. She frowns and slowly regains consciousness. Jean quietly enters the room with Ace on his finger and anxiously asks if she is all right. Adele hides her eyes, then suddenly opens them and seeing him, sighs in amazement. She thanks him for the help and anxiously asks if she has any painful injuries. She says her back hurts a little, probably because she lay in bed for a long time. She wonders aloud whether she has been sleeping since early morning or maybe since last night. Jean calmly tells her that 3 whole days have passed, and she is surprised by this. She feels embarrassed about the inconvenience, but he reassures her, saying he just let her rest. He admits, while she was sleeping, he took the liberty of giving her little bird a new name. Gently stroking the small animal, she looks at him and asks, what name did he choose for it? He looks into her eyes and simply says the new name he chose. A rare, sincere smile blooms on Adelheid's face, and she says that it is a beautiful name. She notices his spirit accepted it, so this guy likes him, and John blushes and is surprised by this. He freezes at her transformation, and without looking away, thinks how beautiful she is without her usual makeup. She feels comfortable next to him and cannot help but ask, is it really so? She thoughtfully thinks that she is not only a beautiful woman, but also an attractive young man. Shin begins to worry. He thinks that this sudden charm is just a trick to lure him to bed. Adelheid looks at him with surprise and asks if he is trying to deceive her. Jean panic feels it gradually dawn on him. She's sitting right on the very bed where he laid her. He waves his hands, assuring that he did not deceive her at all. He offers her soup and some rest, and she quietly asks, can she stay for the night? She assures that she would never commit such cruelty as to drive her out, and sincerely apologizes. Jean smiles and says, get well soon, you still have to thank me. She remembers Infess and calls him an extraordinarily diligent person with a smile. That same day, they find themselves in a noisy, laughter-filled tavern in the city. Jean sees Noda and Dean standing by the bar and talking. Noda, with relief on his face, addresses Adelheid, calling her Ash-sama, and is glad that she is okay. Jean watches from afar as Adelheid stands together with her butler. Adelheid notices, some people have alcoholic drinks, but no one has flowers, and Jean agrees. A cheerful voice joyfully announces the arrival. The traveler Dean has come to them. Dean suggests drinking together to apologize for the earlier troubles and asks, what do you say, Adelheid? Adelheid introduces herself as Ash and calls her partner Noda. She was once an adventurer. Jean looks at them and thinks that it makes no difference 2 or 3. For him, it is the same. On the tavern table stood 2 large wooden mugs filled with frothy beer. Dean asked Jean if he has a type of girls, and at that moment remembered his sister Amel. Dean admits that because of his spiritual connection with masculine energy, adventures constantly come to him, and he asks Jean not to tell anyone about it. He acknowledges his sister is corrupted, and this needs to be fixed. They say that the pranks of spirits can befall anyone, and quite by accident. Adelheid warns, the jokes of spirits can turn into real trouble. This happened when Dean was under their influence. Dean nodded in agreement, and Jean suddenly realized that she was trying to warn him. Adelheid imagines that their strange situation would look really unusual to outsiders. Dean swallows deeply and says that he will settle the payment for Adelheid later. He suggests finding John, because now he lives with his sister. Dear Dean, I ask you to provide 2 rooms for a short stay. I will be sincerely grateful for your help. Jean drinks ale and says with a smile that at his 15, he can do this without guilt, although the drink does not impress him in taste. Dean calls him he wants to attract attention. He wonders, why does John behave like an ordinary adventurer when he clearly does not lack abilities? Dean suggests introducing him to a reliable adventurer, someone who always diligently carries out all assignments. Join agrees to the proposal and sincerely says that it will help a lot. Dean proposes to meet tomorrow at the same hour at Jin Gris. An uncertain Dean, with a tremor in his voice, says that there is one more thing he must tell them. He warns Jean and Adelheid, be careful with that strange attraction to each other. He points at Adelheid and sternly tells her to stop panicking when something goes wrong. Suddenly, Jean says that he really agrees about her frowning look, and this greatly surprises Dean. Dean mutters indignantly, saying that they are the strange ones, and a man from around the corner peeks out displeased. A new chapter begins. Joan wakes up in a soft bed. Rich sleeps nearby. Jean wakes up and cheerfully greets his spirit wolf Rich. Good morning. He picks up the fluffy Rich in his arms, and the animal responds joyfully. Looking out the window, he sees a mountain covered with snow and realizes that winter has come. On a hot frying pan, bacon sizzles appetizingly, and the egg is frying with the yolk facing up. He pours water into the pot, preparing to start cooking. He generously spreads toast with thick plum jam. He bites into a large piece of his breakfast with pleasure and appetite. He decides the combination of sweet jam and salty cheeses is simply a wonderful idea. Sipping his morning drink, he quietly reflects the cold season will come soon. A painful scene flashes before his eyes, the first harsh winter he endured on the island. When the plates are already empty, he smiles and sincerely thanks for the delicious food. He rises from the table and prepares to head to a meeting in the city. He arrives at the familiar rural streets of the border town Kazum. In a dark cloak with a hood, he calls himself Zhang. Adelheid and Not came and introduced them Ash and Not. Adelheid says confidently, I want to pay honestly for the potion. Jean pretends not to notice, but she insists she must thank him. Her face suddenly became serious. She thinks he is hiding something. Jean suggests getting to it as soon as her living situation becomes a bit more stable. Adelheid agrees to his terms and nods respectfully in agreement. When someone calls his name, Jane raises her hand and greets. From behind the neighboring door, Dean waves his hand and calls him to come over. Dean introduces us to the stern man nearby ready, and Jean warmly and friendly greets him. Brett shines with the joy of returning, but honestly admits that official greetings are difficult for him. Jean shakes his hand and thinks, is this the reliable adventure Dean was talking about? Ritzy looks sternly at Dean and calls him by name. Suddenly he pinches James's cheeks and jokes that with such a pretty face James will attract the attention of girls. Dean winks says that he is not as cautious as Gina, she always looks very prudent. John's face is glowing, he jokes that such beauty should be thanked to the gods. She can suddenly exclaim to the surprised Retz to get his attention. Red Sea with a serious look agrees, it's time for them to go. Dean with excitement in his voice asks Rezi if just passing the task will be enough, and Rezi quietly agrees. John jokingly teases, are you ashamed of your face? Ritzai just waved it off and denied it. He settled the first official request, and he sets off into the snowy forest. Step by step they walk on the snow, it crunches constantly under their feet, and Ritzy talks about the main task. Rezi with a spark in his eyes says that in winter he hunts rabbits because their meat is very tasty, and the fur is soft and warm. He adds that bear skins are bought up, but the meat is tough and not as tasty as rabbit meat. John says that recently the reward for bears seems to have decreased. Let's suggest Gina review this and say directly, it is he and Ash who are the reason for this. He points to the ground, intensely explains how to recognize the monster's track on the grass. Jean froze with amazement. Red Sea looked cool and incredibly professional. Rets enthusiastically explains that the rabbit's hind legs are larger than the front ones. Jean immediately recognizes these tracks on the ground were left by a fox. Retz assures that horned rabbits are running nearby. Jean asks how he determined that. He points to a barely noticeable but clear claw mark in the snow. Retz noticed a large fox in front of him and quietly began to stalk it, while Jean froze, impressed by his skills. John realizes that until now he had relied only on his own skills and had not noticed what was happening around him at all. Rets says that his short bow handles ordinary animals well, but against monsters he is powerless. He calmly draws the bow, and his gaze is focused and confident. He notices the target and shoots directly at the giant rabbit. The arrow hits the target exactly. The rabbit freezes in surprise, and its eyes spiral. Retz notices that giant rabbits easily become prey. They come too close out of pure curiosity. Gina Grizz asks with interest if he can also watch how he hunts the fox. In the local shop, a woman enthusiastically praises Retz for the clean and neat work of the butcher. Jean cannot hide his admiration. Red Sea communicates with people so confidently and professionally. In the tavern, festive drinks are brought to their table. Jean sincerely thanks Retz for today's lesson and says he has learned a lot. Ritzy calls John a weirdo. John likes the simple and convenient style of hunting. Jean flustered smiles and says that the methods of the Red Sea are better suited for his thin arms. Reddy laughs and urges him to drink more, and Jean awkwardly thanks him. That night, Jean's estate stands silently amid the snowy mountains under a scattering of bright stars. The next morning, Jean rolls up his sleeve and prepares to start a new habit. During push-ups, he falls and promises himself to finally start training his muscles. Rich looks at this in surprise. He arrives at a city street where neat, well-built houses are lined up. He greeted a potter named Malcolm, and he gladly invited him to his workshop. Malcolm proudly shows a shiny finished bathtub, cat's paw, and Jean is simply delighted. Jean thanks him and Malcolm asks, how does he plan to carry it home? He smiles awkwardly, realizing he completely forgot about this organizational hassle. He panics he cannot use his storage skill, so Malcolm suggests finding a card. Jean immediately waved it off, says he didn't touch anything, and asks the potter to just wrap the purchase. Malcolm and his assistant carry the bathtub outside and ask, have we carried enough already? Jean watches attentively while Potter Malcolm enthusiastically talks about the custom bathtub project. He listens to the conversation with a slight surprise on his face. He thinks that using his storage magic for such a large item is a real hassle. Snow gently begins to fall on the wooden house he rents in Kashumi. John gets to work and tirelessly tears off the old broken tile from the floor. On the cold street, he digs a trench, preparing to lay a new water supply system. He carefully builds a new wall, putting all his attention into each brick. When the main work is finished, he smiles satisfied with what he has done. He stands in the new bathroom and admires the installed clawfoot bathtub with delight. A sudden knock on the door pulls him out of his moment of satisfaction. Delhade appeared, shyly apologized for the unexpected visit, and extends a gift. She says, I came to congratulate you on the move. Gina, freezing with joy, wonders and asks where she found this house. She points to the neighboring building, and this news simply overwhelms him. He laughed when he realized that now they live almost next door. Delhade says that the note was found in the house, although she never told Jean the address. Jean suspects that it was not an accident, but most likely his own mistake. She confesses, next to him she feels a strange lightness, as if she is flying. He is puzzled by how much she blushed when she asked if he felt that she was as if flying. He abruptly changes the subject and invites her to come in from the cold. He hands her a cup of tea, gently inviting her to help herself. At the table, he sincerely thanks her for the gift, and with a joyful smile says that he really likes it. And in the gift, a beautiful, appetizing fig tartlet. He bites off a piece, and the sound of the fork clinking against the plate is heard. He says with admiration, this is the most delicious dessert he has tasted in this city. Delhade enthusiastically praises her butler Nout for his excellent taste. She looks with lively interest and changes the subject. When she came to his door, she asked with curiosity what he was cooking. He tells her that it was a bath, but in her ears these words sound strange and incomprehensible. She gasps in surprise, how can one take a bath right inside the house? Deciding that it is easier to show her, he leads her to the room. Delhade is glowing with delight upon seeing the exquisite modern bathroom. She asks again, is this really a bath? He confirms yes, this is a bath. She whispers softly that she has never seen anything so beautiful. He invites her to try it first, as soon as the walls dry. Delhade, with eyes burning with excitement, asks if she can bring Not to show him this incredible creation. The pause stretches they wait for the arrival of the butler. Notbeer politely knocks on the door, as if announcing his arrival. Delhade proudly shows the new bath to her impressed butler. She, shining with joy, reminds him that she was the first to promise to use it. Jean suddenly sweated as soon as he remembered that Delhade is a noble lady. Note amused said with a slight smile, although the servant must refuse, he himself is filled with curiosity. Then he, unable to contain his curiosity, asked if Jean had already shown them the kitchen. Delhade notices that there is suddenly no unpleasant smell in the house at all. Notin interestedly clarifies the characteristics of the partition in the toilet and asks which workshop made it. Jean froze for a moment in hesitation, then admitted that he did it himself. The butler simply froze. This unexpected news shocked him. Delhade shines with pride, says that Jean repaired the house himself. Nod urgently and anxiously asks, did he register these techniques with the guild? He does not back down, insists that John do it immediately, and assures that he will definitely earn a lot. The scene shifts to John. He stands in the middle of a snowy forest and fearfully feels that he is in trouble. He shivers by the frozen lake and tremulously says, too cold. He is going to craft a futon for Delhade, but first he needs a down jacket. He notices geese with horns and decides to quickly hunt them and return home. His hand glowed with power. He is about to cast a spell. He draws the bow and whispers a silent spell so no one hears his shot. The arrow silently flew through the cold air straight to the geese. One of the birds is hit, it screams and flies away. He sincerely smiles, shining with joy over the successful shot. He begins to pull in the catch, but feels that something is wrong. Suddenly other birds take off, attracted by the smell of blood. He rushes away, instantly teleporting. He returns home unharmed, frightened by the unexpected attack. In his home, the fire crackles cozily, from it flows warmth and comfort. He sits by the stove together with Rish and decides, later they will still go hunting. A loud knock sounds at the door of the stone manor. He opens it and sees a note. Someone asks how his move is going. Adelhaida is also here and sincerely thanks Jean for help with the repairs. She tells how people from the trade guild came to look at his work. But for the housewarming, she gives him a mattress so light that it amazes. The note says it is made from the feathers of a white goose, decorated with horns. Jean is stunned. He knows this is an incredibly valuable and extremely high-quality item. Adelheid admits that this is probably too luxurious a gift for a housewarming. Jean smiles embarrassedly and admits he did not even suspect how valuable these geese are. Adelheid invites him to her place. For dinner, her kitchen is not ready yet. She tells John he should also go with them. He gently refuses, saying that the butler does not dine with the master. Adelhaidensis says, I invited him to Henniger's. The scene shifts again to the wooden houses in Kashum. For dinner, they bring true luxury, a fully roasted goose. John says he tried very hard. He wanted to bake exactly the fig pie she brought him. Not carefully examines the rosy roasted goose, and with a smile notes that it is really very high quality. All three quietly whisper thanks for the food, and only then start to eat. Adelheid, not restraining her appetite, bites off a large piece of pie. She opens her eyes in surprise and says, this is very tasty. Look how true gourmets savor the soup. They really like this truly unusual combination of flavors. Jean catches a stern expression on Adelhaid's face, but clearly sees she likes the dish. He feels that with each moment, he understands her better and better. He tells her that she looks happy, and she agrees delicious food really makes her happy. Note approaches to serve the tart, but suddenly freezes, sensing danger. A small, dark, seemingly blurred spirit suddenly bursts out of the desert. She flies past Jean, and the pies remain on the plate, still steaming. As soon as Adelheid felt the magic, a stern seriousness immediately appeared on her face. Note's face becomes serious. He intently watches what is happening. She suddenly froze in amazement, unable to comprehend what had just happened. They conducted a session of communication with Chris's spirits, and suddenly a mysterious dark creature emerged among them. Adelheid feels that Jean is just pretending not to know anything to test what her magic is capable of. Jean realized he is already suspected, so he needs to wriggle out and pretend that everything is under control. He smiles, says it's due to the temperature difference, and gently offers to bring a towel. He walks away, and the thoughtful Adelheid silently watches him with his gaze. The elderly butler watches intently, looking very worried, but remains silent. The djinn considers how to tame the fire spirit, remembering that it fears metal. He declares this a punishment and coldly immerses the box in a jar of brine. Sighing with relief, he carefully places on the ground a special enameled vessel that he brought from Kasamo. Note his mood promise that later you will prepare everything he loves. Suddenly a note appears behind him and fear grips him. It addresses him by name. Jean turns around, smiling, and asks the butler what he needs. Tension, Bose sincerely apologizes his gloomy mood spoiled the taste of the pie. Embarrassed Gina Sif Adelheid she knows, spirits exist. Jin Fein could not understand what was happening with the spirit that was inside. The explanation reveals a strict hierarchy between the main and side branches of noble families. He suddenly notices that Jean's gray hair and amber eyes resemble Adelhaid's features. Gina thinks in surprise, is the ability to control spirits something known? He does not want to get involved in family matters, so he decides to just stand aside. He seals the spirit and says to the one who left the note, next time enter through the entrance. On the head of the note suddenly appears the spirit of a mushroom, and she confuses it with a cucumber. Jin felt a chill of realization. Now he and the butler share one secret. In the dark night sky, countless bright stars twinkle. Next to the noisy port, a huge ship is moored. Jin arrives at the noisy fish market of the port city to start an investigation. A small white kitten, quietly sneaking, tries to steal fish from the seller's basket. He smiles, absorbing the noisy and energetic spirit of the market. He notices his sister and her friends and immediately remembers how they misused their magic. The diagram shows how magic penetrates spirits and turns ordinary animals into terrifying monsters. He wonders whether the hero is recklessly diving into magic without thinking about what it might lead to. He eavesdrops on the local fishermen grumbling angrily about competitors entering their territory. One of the fishermen sadly recounts that during recent fights they sustained injuries. Another fisherman laughs and says, "Actually, all the problems are because of this hero and the saint." He believes that if a demon lord ever appears, that might be when they need his help. The pickpocket reaches for a wallet, and at that very moment he is caught red-handed. When the thief is caught, a small wallet with money slips from his hands. John grabs the bag and immediately realizes the pickpocket is running away from him. It seems that nothing has changed in his sister's life yet. Looking around, he decides to buy seafood and go home. Snow gently covered the roof of his large, quiet mansion. He prepares a delicious dinner, fresh raw oysters alongside crispy fried ones. He raises a fresh oyster to his lips, preparing to taste it. Fresh oysters are juicy and incredibly delicious. They can be eaten safely. They have already passed inspection. Fried oysters are also incredibly tasty, a real delicacy, with a pleasant miso aroma. He decides to save the leftover oysters. He will marinate them in oil. Seeing that Rich is looking at him, he gently asked the spirit if he wanted to play. Rich cautiously approaches the outstretched hand and sniffs it carefully. The wolf spirit turns its head away and snorts disdainfully. He asked if the smell of seafood bothers Rich as he walks away. When darkness falls, he suddenly realizes he needs to somehow light up the space. He uses his magic and the window flashes with bright, dazzling light. Blinded by the dazzling light, he exclaims and presses his hands to his eyes. He decisively decides to learn to better control his magic and plans to start special training tomorrow. In a deep, snowy forest where monsters dwell, he begins special training. A low growl nearby hints to him a horned rabbit is sitting close by. He releases all his power, forming a huge and formidable fireball. The fireball envelops the horned rabbit and tosses it upward. The defeated monster lies on the ground, barely moving. Dizziness swirls in its eyes. He understands that his power is immense, so he must learn to tame it. He trains to control his power by swallowing a huge wolf along with another fireball. He sends a blade into the air and slices another monster rabbit. He summons water spheres and unleashes them on the horned fox, covering it with magical charges. After a long night of training, he feels as if he has become much better. He looks at the pile of fallen monsters and thinks, "Did I overdo it?" He decides to use his ability to store and creates a source of light. In front of you stands a huge wooden building of the Adventurers Guild. He enters the guild to look at the tasks of this season. He decides once again to go to the very heart of the forest and explore everything. One of the travelers says that in the deep forest there was a strange anxiety as if something was happening there. Dean is worried hunting the Trigurna without an official and well-paid task seems too risky to him. He clenches his fist, showing how strong and dangerous these three horns are. Chris, with impatience in his voice, says he can no longer wait for the creature to become stronger. Jin stirs looks confused. The bright appearance of the stranger completely threw him off. Jin tries hard to remember Chris's name because it seems familiar to him. Adelhaida and Nod return from hunting carrying a large bear skin. Chris smiled, greeted Adelhaida, and jokingly called her a bear hunter. Chris feels that Adelhaida is not in the mood, but insists that their task is very important. John recalled how Dean told him, "Chris could become a good partner for you." Chris approaches Jean closer and says that he is a complicated but extremely interesting man. He smiles warmly and, comparing him to the Dark Lord, asks who this handsome person is. Adelhaida agrees with a dry smile. Jean really resembles the Dark Ruler. Chris introduces himself. Chris leads a silver rank adventurer with 3 stars. As soon as their palms clasped, Jean suddenly noticed that Chris's hair and eye color changed. Chris smiles with quiet confidence and warmth in his eyes, carefully assessing the young man before him. He solemnly invites Jane to go hunting for the 3-horned with him. Jane froze in shock when she realized she had been drawn into this dangerous adventure. Chris solemnly invites the Dark Lord to go hunting with him. John is still in shock. He understands that he has been drawn into this situation. Dean barely restrains laughter, and Chris seriously says that he will remember this. Chris confesses, although he hasn't seen the monsters himself, his heart still tightens with anxiety. He puffs out his chest and declares that his strong intuition is working right now. Dean stands stunned. Chris does this only based on his feelings. Chris insists that these are not just his guesses, and this increasingly irritates Dean. Chris asked whether to go hunting right now or better wait until spring. Not whispers to Jean, "Why does this bright man have such power over everyone?" The The note says that Master Chris is accompanied and helped by a spirit. A spirit is a special kind of revelation. It senses premonitions and has a good reputation. John knows those who see spirits are enveloped by higher powers' protection. This blessing pours strength into you. You become more resilient, faster, and sunburns no longer scare you. Dean understands. This task requires 2 adventurers of silver rank, and one of them must be him. Chris sternly reminds Dean, you owe the guild. The guild decided to hire 2 iron rank adventurers to send them on a hunt for the 3-horned. Dean felt the weight of the decision. They would have to call experienced gold rank adventurers from other cities. Chris has a serious expression. He notices that something is wrong in the forest. The atmosphere is unnatural. Delhade frowns when she realizes that the unpleasant smell comes from miasma. Tense silence hung between Adelhade, John, and Dean. Everyone seemed to hold their breath, waiting for someone to finally say something important. Dean sincerely asks John to join their adventure in the forest as soon as spring comes. John instantly stops him, quickly passes the ball, and raises his hand. Dean immediately shouted for Jean to take the luggage and run away from danger. Jean admits he himself is curious about how the spirits feel in the forest. He agrees to the task, and this incredibly surprises and pleases Dean. Genesis Adelhades must also join because 2 souls listening is much better than 1. Dean agreed. We will submit a request through the guild and wait for spring. The victor silently observes Jean's behavior. The roof and yard are covered with a thick layer of snow. By the fire, Jean anxiously suspects that it is his sister's magic causing the strange events in the forest. He decides to go back to the forest tomorrow, angry that he has to deal with her problems again. On the screen, the inscription, he is heading to the deepest part of the demonic forest. He steps into the snowy forest to find out how the spirits are doing there. When he activates his ability, a whole cloud of barely visible ephemeral creatures appears in the air right in front of him. Every week a small fairy with wings flies through the sparkling air, and its shape constantly changes. A ghostly fox hovers in the air as if about to dissolve, and its essence seems exhausted and worn out. A tiny dark spirit, like a blot, trembles. It barely holds together and is about to completely disperse. He notices that most of the spirits that come to his home look completely shabby. Suddenly, a larger spirit with bat-like wings desperately attacks a smaller and weaker one. The dark spirit bites and absorbs the other. It instantly disappears in a light smoke. The dark shadow of the spirit seems to gather together and becomes denser, more real. He realizes they devour each other to restore the lost essence, a spectacle he cannot endure. He will not heal on his own. He will have to make deals and give them names, just as he did with Rish. Suddenly he dares and firmly grabs one of the dark, ghostly creatures. He looks at the tiny creature and gives it a new name, You Are Black. He presses another tiny spirit to his heart and calls it Black 2. He holds a dark ghost hair in his hands and gently calls it Black 3. He holds a barely noticeable squirrel in his hands and insists that it is Black 4. Sighing heavily, he decides, that's enough work for today. He finds naming the spirits that do not obey him extremely exhausting. The bright daytime sun tears rays through the branches as he leaves the dense forest. He walks on the snow, step by step approaching the familiar stone house of his friends. From the door suddenly someone asks, does he have a free minute? The whole Dionysio family warmly welcomes him, and the children joyfully shout his name. The father hugs him tightly. For John, this is still unusual. He gives various souvenirs, and smilingly says that he also brought a cake with him. 2 boys look at him. There is a spark in their eyes and happy smiles on their lips. The children all together hug him and sincerely thank him for being near. The father smiles and says that Gina is always so attentive when receiving gifts. Mother Shibo sincerely thanks him and says that she will now cut the cake for everyone. The father, already a little tipsy from sake, wondered, what is Jean doing? Shiva says that in winter they sit by the fire, shell beans, and repair agricultural tools. Jean extends a hand with an offer of help, and the father gratefully accepts it. Shiva returns with a smile and, shining with joy, says that she has already cut the cake. The boys gladly eat the cake and say that it is incredibly delicious. Daughter Tina blushed, but boldly announced that she would become Jean's bride. Her mother laughs, and her father categorically states that he will not allow it. The father firmly denies that Tina promised in childhood to marry him when she grew up. He demands from John that he directly explain what exactly he dislikes about his daughter, and this greatly surprises John. 2 boys laugh and shout that now they will go and become John's grooms. They pounced on the surprised Gina and hugged him tightly. The father looks grim and determined. He runs up quickly, loudly shouting that he is joining too, and hugs everyone together tightly. Tina and her mother watched this fuss and laughed heartily. John thinks how cozy an ordinary family can be completely unlike his own. Winter flies by quickly, and with the first breath of spring, it is time to set off on the road. A bright voice like fanfares solemnly announces the arrival of the sage Chris. Chris greets Adelheid, but she is clearly not thrilled. She does not like his new nickname at all. Hardened by adventures, Rhett steps forward and officially introduces himself to the team. Rhett warns Jean, be careful because now Chris is in charge of their battle plans. Dean admits that he gets nervous when he takes a novice hunting with him. Both Adelheid and Chris agree with this. Dean asks if Adelheid is the famous new bear hunter. Jean realizes that he hasn't visited the guild for a long time to register his achievements. Chris laughed. Finally, he understood everything, and the puzzle came together. Jean pondered, maybe that's why Chris insisted so much that he come because the spirit was favorable to him. Chris says that his soul had long been whispering about Jean. A small winged fairy, full of curiosity, sits on Chris's shoulder and admiringly gazes at his handsome face. Kaina, a young woman, officially introduces herself to the entire group. Kana bows low to Jean, sincerely thanks him for past help, and says he need not worry. She shyly asks him to describe his backpack when they return. She handed him a beautifully decorated bottle of gift from the guild to keep him safe. The squad leaves the city and heads into the very heart of the forest. Dean, with curiosity in his voice, notices James's stylish leather backpack and asks what the strap on top is for. Jean proudly explains, it's a futon he made himself, and this greatly surprises his interlocutor. Adelheid and Dean doubt whether it is practical at all. Thought that the item will be heavy and uncomfortable torments them. Jean easily and quickly shows how to unbuckle the chest strap with one motion using the clasp. Chris thinks that probably the luggage of his company causes the most trouble. His companion simply swoons at his serious look, and Jean finds it funny. The group walks closely together, step by step, going deeper into the forest. Chris steps with light athletic grace, carefully listening to every sound around. Reddy boldly goes forward on a reconnaissance, and nearby a little fox cheerfully jumps on a tree branch. The Red Sea seems to whisper, time to stop for the night. The weather was on their side. They flew forward and quickly set up camp near the stream. Jean pulls a heavy cast iron pot from the backpack, as if you can get anything out of this backpack. He lights a fire and starts cooking stew from dried chicken and vegetables. The stew is boiling wildly, so the dish is already ready. Next, he pulls a bunch of clawtrat from the bag, preparing another surprise. He opens the box. Inside are neatly arranged sandwiches with pork cutlets and fried chicken. Dean, chewing, thoughtfully says that Jean's lunch looks very tasty. In a moment, everyone in the company simultaneously rushes to the box with sandwiches. Chris bites a piece and wonders how soft and tender this bread is. Red Sea and Dean smiled and nodded. The meat is really tasty, although they prefer firmer bread. Look closely at the cutlet and ask, is the breading really made from ordinary breadcrumbs? Jean explains how everything happens and sighs. The oyster sauce preparation takes the most time and effort. Adelheid tastes a piece of fried chicken and instantly understands, this is real chicken. Jean talks about the marinade. We add a little salt and pepper, garlic and ginger, fish sauce, and a drop of brandy. Having enjoyed the delicious food, the team is already getting ready to move on. The traveler's boots confidently step along the green path in the forest. Jean glances down and sees that his shoes are covered in dust. They are noticeably dirtier than the others' footwear. Jean looks admiringly. Butler's shoes are always perfectly polished. Even on the path, they remain impeccably clean. Chris warns that a pack of wolves is ahead, and Jean decides to mimic his movements with the same ease. With a smile, Chris explains, wolves are weaker than bears, but they hunt in packs, and that is what makes them very dangerous. Jean and Adelheid took the warning seriously and rushed to prepare for the impending danger. Jean knows well, Chris sometimes annoys, but at the same time is attentive and caring. Suddenly, a pack of wolves comes out of the forest. They growl and bare their teeth, and their appearance is heard with a muffled roar. Redson and Chris instantly turned around, grabbed their weapons, and tensely prepared to face the wolf pack. To Jean's surprise, the wolves pay no attention to the others and immediately attack him. Vretz shouts the name, his voice breaking with anxiety, and Jean winks and says that probably they consider him the weakest. John firmly plants his foot in the grass, preparing for the attack. He sharply lunges forward, raises the heavy sword high, and prepares to deliver a devastating blow from above. Jean focuses, preparing to unleash the full power of his sword. With one smooth movement, Jean easily sweeps the sword, and the entire pack of wolves instantly falls. Ritzy stands with his mouth open, stunned by the incredible strength of Jun. Sparks of admiration light up in Chris's eyes as he solemnly declares, "Jean, you are from the dark arts." Chris is delighted. He really likes that Jun seems vulnerable, although in reality this is not so, and John disagrees with this in his mind. Dean sincerely admits that at first he misjudged the situation, and Ritsai, seeing the newcomer's strength, loses confidence. Note wisely advises them to move on before the smell of blood attracts even more dangerous animals. Dean agreed without hesitation and decisively demanded that everyone leave this place immediately. The group retreats from the site of the battle with Swift and goes deeper into the forest. On the title page of the 12th chapter, a clear message appears: the heroes choose peace, not rebellion. At the new campsite, Jean begins to set up a simple and convenient tent in the shape of the letter A. He kneels by his work and decides that this simple shelter is quite enough for him. Red Sea casts a skeptical glance and asks, is Jean being too careless with his equipment? Chris suddenly realizes the waterproof canvas is perfect for a simple roof and walls. He spreads his arms, shining with admiration, praises John's work and goes to hug him. Jean recalls how he spent 2 months on a deserted island, alone, fighting for survival. Delhade helps laying soft moss, turning it into a cozy, comfortable bedding. Chris notices when everyone arranges their sleeping spots, it looks like a Japanese camp in the mountains. Jean says they will go fishing for dinner together with the others. He decides to cook soup for everyone. He gladly agrees to this idea. The night turned out cold. A large cauldron with delicious broth, full of meat and vegetables, bubbles cheerfully on the campfire. Jean Sturts from Padu happily serves tomato soup with dried meat and plenty of vegetables. Dean scratches his head and has a puzzled expression, as if he forgot something very important. He remembered how Jean had slapped Dao earlier and wondered, was it some kind of strange ritual? Dean still cannot understand why June behaved so strangely, as if performing some mysterious rite. The ready ball of dough rests on the stone, smooth, even, and already prepared for use. Jin sets the dough aside to rest, already planning that it will be part of the next day's breakfast. Through a gap in the dense crowns of the dark forest, the endless starry night sky opens up. Dinner by the fire is ready, a large cauldron of soup, fried fish, and a mysterious pizza. Chris, full of curiosity, asks about the unfamiliar dish, and Jean smiles and explains that it is pizza with bacon and asparagus. Chris stands confused and, not hiding his surprise, says that he has never heard of pizza before. Dean, still blushing from embarrassment, asks John to explain the strange ritual with the deer that he had done earlier. A hand lifts a piece of pizza melted cheese, stretches behind it in a long, sticky thread. Dean bites off a big piece, his eyes widen with delight, and he exclaims, "This is incredibly delicious." Not enthusiastically praises the seasoning, and Jean says it would also be tasty with tomato sauce. The butler looks up in surprise and asks if Jean might have tomato sauce by any chance. Suddenly Jean realizes, in this world, he has never seen fresh tomatoes even once. Delhade enthusiastically praises the tasty soup, and Jean says he just added a little dried tomatoes. Chris carefully and gently removes a leaf from Jean's collar. He is upset by the thought that John could become a wonderful bride, and this annoys John himself madly. Dean jokingly puffs out his chest and asks Jean, who is his ideal. Jean is convinced that Adelheid has small breasts, and the thought makes her embarrassed and blush. The butler stands completely exhausted and confused. The evening hustle has worn him out. Ritsu asks if Jean does not trust people, and Jean, quietly smiling, admits that he is still learning to communicate with others. He painfully recalls how he once found himself surrounded by unreliable people and became a victim of their jokes. In thought bubbles, Red Sea and Chris Wonder openly talk about what really lies behind these jokes. Dean says that he was probably incredibly embarrassed when, after his confession, they started laughing at him. Jean clarifies it happened 3 times, and each time it was about girls of different ages. Dean is completely shocked and exclaims, being cursed 3 times is simply incredible. RETS believes that June's unique experience really helped him get to know himself better. Jean finally saw the truth. Behind every misfortune of his was a cunning older sister. He clearly remembers, behind all 3 cases was his sister, who acted through her friends. She treated him as her property and enjoyed teasing him, so he learned to pretend that he did not care. Chris Patz notices that Jean's shoulder seems happier, and Jean thanks him. Delhade is silent, looking intently at Jean. Her serious gaze is hard to understand. The camera slowly rises through the dark trees and reveals the starry night sky above the forest. Jean sits alone by the crackling campfire and slowly sips a hot drink from a mug. He stared into the darkness and thought about how cold the nights had become even in spring. A small bird spirit descended and sat on his shoulder, and he greeted it warmly. A voice sounded off-screen. It was time to change the guard for the night watch. Adelheid approaches the fire to relieve John on duty. She offers him Florentine cookies and sincerely thanks him for all his good deeds. She proudly shows off the new coat he gave her and enthusiastically talks about how light and comfortable it is. She shyly whispered that she created this coat herself to repay him for the potion he gave her. Seeing his calm facial expression, she tightens up with anxiety. Suddenly, he did not like the cookies she offered. She quietly says to him, "You are a good person and deserve happiness." Jean, surprised, thanks her and says that all his past problems were just coincidences. He looks at her and suddenly realizes she sincerely wants to support and encourage him. He says that he met good people and therefore began to trust people more, and she asks if that is really so. Adelheid lingers her gaze on him and says that she would be happy to be among these good people. A little confused, June quietly confirms, "Yes, I am one of them too." He gets up to leave and tells her, "Next on duty will be you." Adelheid bites a cookie and feels that Jean's openness simultaneously embarrasses and pleasantly surprises her. She blushes, realizing that he is the complete opposite of her cunning and two-faced sister. Jean quietly smiles to himself and thinks that before tomorrow, everyone should get a good night's sleep. Meanwhile, Retz and Dean barely touch the roasted meat. It's a pity there is no strong alcohol to wash it down. Retz agreed and said that this food is much tastier than what he eats in the city. In a few days, the company sits by the campfire and still hasn't found the one they were looking for. Adelheid closes her eyes and instantly recognizes that familiar spicy drink Redovni. The record confirms her feeling. The drink really tastes of ripe berries, pepper, and spices. Jean looks with surprise. He had never heard of such wine before. Chris holds a freshly baked bun in his hands and can't believe it. Bread can be made simply in a pot. Warm bread in a bowl, next to it a plate with liver pâté, a simple meal in the camp. Jin thoughtfully considered how important it is to get enough iron and vitamins during a long journey. Chris points to Jin's strange conical tent and jokes whether he is going to sleep in it. Jean smiles and explains, it's not for sleeping, it's his homemade steam bath that he crafted. He enthusiastically tells the interested Chris how he wove the dome frame from branches. Inside the tent, a fire gently heats a neatly stacked pile of smooth river stones. John shows how everything happens. He pours water on the hot stones, they sizzle and raise thick steam. Jean pours water on the hot stones, and Chris watches with admiration. He imagines how incredibly pleasant it would be to jump into the river and refresh himself right now. Chris calls him and Jean turns back to the traveler. Chris prays Jean's became a real salvation in the wild conditions. They were incredibly comfortable. Jean suggests Chris use the sauna, and he gratefully agrees. Other guests at the party join the surprise. He gestures nodding towards the sauna and asks if everyone else also wants to go. Other group members readily agree to the relaxing bath. Then Jane hangs the sheet to dry and notices that their mischief has slightly delayed things. He moves away from the river, and one dark, thick drop falls to the ground. He finds himself in a clearing, around which small dark spirits line up. He realizes he must name them, but the fear of exposure tightens his throat. Through the dense foliage of the forest, the morning sky is visible from above. The next day, the team sets off again deeper and deeper into the forest. After the bath, Dean shines with satisfaction, and Chris notices that they are moving very fast. Suddenly, the smile disappears from Dean's face. He instantly becomes serious and deeply focused. He shouts to the others, "Wait," and rushes forward, overtaking Jean. A huge three-horned lizard, a udikig, blocks their path ahead. Dean jumped with surprise. He thought he would only encounter 2 hornets here. Rixie quietly whispers to Joan, "Stay here and wait for the signal." He says directly, their only chance to attack will appear only when it raises its head. Dean quietly told Chris that they would split up, and Chris calmly agreed. Dean confidently strides forward, gritting his teeth, preparing to attack the mighty monster. Adelheid is on alert. The huge lizard is struggling through the forest. On Dean Gritz's face was such an expression, and his teeth were clenched so tightly that it was clear he was full of determination. He rushes headlong into the creature, and it staggers, losing its balance. When the monster stumbles, Dean shouts to Chris, "Act." Chris instantly lunged forward. His sword was already cutting a downward arc. His sword, like an arrow, hits the target precisely and plunges deep into the monster's throat. With a cold smile, Chris stands triumphantly over the fallen beast. Adelheid praises their excellent teamwork with sincere admiration and says it is truly impressive. Retz gently calms John and says he knows he is a cautious person. John mentally admits to himself he wouldn't have managed this on his own. Ritzy firmly states it was a 3-horned one that escaped from the cage. Another adventurer opened his eyes wide in surprise. Usually only one horn is the best. John froze, stunned. He couldn't believe how enormous this forest was. Dean sighs with relief and says, their task is now complete. Letzi suggests staying overnight, and Dean agrees. Chris turned to Jean and asked for help dividing their trophy. On the riverbank, John and Reddy, with heavy hearts, undertake the difficult task of dissecting the carcass. Retz, with eyes wide in admiration, watches Jones and loudly praises his skill in cutting meat. John Demur says that his special drawing style was born from practice during hunting. He is distracted for a moment, and suddenly another strange thing he noticed emerges from memory. He notices that an even larger horde of dark spirits has gathered nearby. He wonders if the great spirits turn into monsters with more horns. Jean addressed Rhett with anxiety in his voice. How much fuel do we still have for cooking? Reddy is told they have plenty of everything, so Jean decides to go gather asparagus. The red swans beg him not to go far from the safe campfire. Jin suddenly comes across several late winter mushrooms and a plant of garlic mustard. He decides to put his explorer skills to use again. His eye flashes with mighty power as he activates his skill and surveys the area. He already senses that a fox is nearby, and it is rapidly approaching. He suddenly realizes it is a two-horned one, and it is heading straight for them. He understands he must immediately warn Redsea the monster is approaching. He rushes back to the camp and shouts that a bald monster is lurking nearby. Redsea, as if confessing, says he used cedar leaves to hide their scent. He hands Janny a tiny jar of ointment so they can conceal their smell. Fox flashed like lightning and dashed at Joan at full speed. The Red Sea is surprised, but thinks this battle will be easier than the one with Utakagi. The fox's paws quickly stomp on the ground. It is rapidly approaching. Saliva drips from the creature's jaws. It is preparing to attack. Ritsai calls Jones by name and anxiously warns him while the fox sneaks up on him. Jean draws a sword ready to fight the huge monster alone. As soon as the fox jumps, Redsea shouts, Jones, at the top of his lungs and raises the alarm. Jean tenses before the attack, his face stern and completely focused. Suddenly, the fox falls right in front of him and quietly whimpers. Betsy does not understand what is happening at all. She looks confused at all this strange. Dean asks with surprise if Jean handled those two horned ones by himself. Chris approaches and solemnly addresses Jean, pronouncing her name with respect. Joyfully grabbing June by the hands, he calls him the new star. Nod and Adelheid glow with joy because he is fine. Dean stands looking at the trembling fox, still amazed by Jean's strength. He says that he thought we were just supposed to hunt lizards. He smiles and explains that lizards don't go far, but foxes are a completely different matter. They can roam far. Chris notices that if a two-horned dinosaur is standing nearby, then somewhere close by there is definitely a three-horned dinosaur lurking. Jean listens attentively, feeling how dangerous the appearance of the fox can be. Dean shakes his head. It's not worth staying here, so we will return in the morning. That night, meatballs sizzle in a large pot on the campfire. Dean asks Jean if he really liked the fried chicken that much. The friends eat pasta with appetite and enthusiastically note its special taste. The next day, under the bright sun, they set off home. The group calmly returns back through the forest, encountering no more problems. Chris and Dean walk together, alert and ready for any surprises. Finally, the path leads them again to the stone gates of the city. A woman from the guild approaches them, smiles, and sincerely thanks them for the completed work. John quietly sighs to himself. He really does not want to report to the guild leadership. He hurriedly asked Adelheid to write a note and collect the reward on his behalf. He asks them to go home and prepare a hot bath for him. Dean, confused and surprised, asked, is Jean already leaving them? He agrees but already insists. John must later tell him everything about the spirits. Jean returns to that quiet street where his rented house stands. He sighs wearily and throws a few more logs into the fireplace. The small fiery spirits in the salamander playfully frolic in the fireplace. He asks the spirit, which resembles a fairy, to carry messages between his houses. Thanks to his ability to preserve, he instantly fills the bath with hot water. He begs the spirits not to extinguish the heat in the bathhouse for his friends. Using his ability to transfer skills, he is determined to prepare to set off to his domains. He returns to his true home and calls his companion Rish. The little wolf spirit happily jumps right into his arms. He gently strokes the happy wolf and suggests, first take a bath and only then play. Adelheid immerses herself in the warm bath and quietly sighs with relief. John sits by the fire and thinks, I will have to wash 3 times to get really clean. Suddenly, a small winged spirit flies into the room and John sincerely thanks him for coming. He asks the spirit to wait, then activates the movement skill and instantly teleports. He returns to the bathroom to drain the now slightly warm water. Fresh, hot water pours into the bathtub on legs with a rumble. Jean warmly greets Adele Hyde in a note, apologizes for taking so long, and invites her to come inside. Note hands him a heavy pouch of money. Jean thanks and accepts it. He tells them that the bath is already ready and sincerely thanks them for the preparation. Holding the bucket in her hands, Adele Hyde reports that everything is already ready. Jean brings a drink and a toast with cheese, and he sincerely thanks him for it. He asked where one could find such a nice bath. The note whispered that this is a rare import, one would have to wait half a year. Jean nervously worries, what if the nice dishes make people think that he is from a wealthy family? Not asks Jean Lynn Adelheim to buy a robe, but Jean brushes it off. It was a gift. The butler's face becomes stern. He is about to share his conclusions. He decisively announces that he and Adelheid will join the squad to destroy the enemy. Jean absolutely does not want to go to the forest again, and Not says that he cannot just take the cloak. Confused, Jean raises his hands and tries to refuse the bag of money. Not's stern look leaves John no choice. Nervously, he grabs the money. Adele Hyde steps out of the bath. Her long, wet hair instantly draws gazes. Jean tells her to have some tea while he prepares the next bath, but she offers to help. He smiles and insists that she rest. A servant cannot allow his mistress to do such a task. Not apologizes and carries a basket with used towels and other things. Jean brings a tray with drinks and says to Adele Hyde, "Don't rush." He suddenly realizes that he is seeing her with her hair down for the first time. Strange tension runs through Wotlhyde when the spirit of a bird lands on her head. Suddenly her mood changes. She frowns and gets lost in thought. Jean notices she looks like a hired killer again and asks what happened. She asked if he had seen spirits in the forest, and he confirmed he had seen. She says that since the court mage went mad, she hasn't seen spirits in such a state. She recalls seeing Jin walking among the dark, corrupted spirits he found. Jin, full of curiosity, asks, how does the use of magic usually look, since he has rarely seen it with his own eyes? She says that spirits willingly give a part of their power to those who make a contract with them. John understood with horror that the molten shadow spirits he saw were destroyed by forced magic. She bitterly explains that their dark images are a sign of their offense, which poisons everything around. He asked if mages eventually become monsters themselves, and she quietly answered, yes, that's true. Jin smiles sadly. He feels that his sister is turning into a demonic lord rather than a heroine. Delhade explains that if magic is skillfully used, spirits really become stronger and more resilient. She says that spirits will gladly help if addressed politely, not forced. She says sadly, she was lucky she was never corrupted and she still remained herself. She could not help but compare her own state with the sufferings they had seen. She anxiously asked John if people had corrupted these spirits. Sheena suddenly stands up and asks to wait a minute, and this leaves her confused. He returns with a warm smile and quietly says, I'm already here. He whispered to her not to tell anyone anything, especially the butler who just brought the tray. On the tray, as if in a sweet fairy tale, various pastries and desserts are neatly arranged, everything so she could indulge. Adelheda looks at the unfamiliar sweets with a gleam of admiration in her eyes. He admits that he is not sure if she will like it, but he really wants her to try. He says, of course, one must not forget about the spirits, but eternal longing also harms health. Adelheid shines with joy because of his kindness and gratefully accepts the gift. She bites a piece of eclair, and her face instantly blooms with a surprised smile. John offers her a cup of tea, and with a slight smile asks if she enjoys this sweet drink. She thoughtfully bites a piece of strawberry cake with a fork. Her eyes open wide from the incredible taste, and true delight flashes across her face. She says she has already tasted the apple tart, but this one is simply incredible, a completely different level. Pointing at the strawberry, she asked him, what is this little red fruit? He remembers how his heart pounded when he served an unfamiliar dish to a noble lady. He smiles, although he doesn't know how to comfort people. Sweets seem to help. Adelheid nods with a satisfied smile. She really liked it. She calmly sips tea, and the sadness in her has completely melted away. She openly talks about her size and pleasure, confessing that she previously didn't even realize how simple a person she was. Jean tells her that her mood has improved significantly, and it shows. Adelgeda smiles gently and asks the little bird if that is really so. Jean looks at the two of them and quietly smiles himself, sharing their happy moment. Look outside near the building. His lady looks much better. On the screen appears a large wooden frame house. This is where they stopped. Jean, already in a traveling cloak, freezes he is stopped by the experienced traveler Ritsum. Retz approached John and asked hopefully if he could sew a bag for him and promised to pay for the work. Jean notices with surprise that both Dean and Chris also asked him for bags. Ritzy warns him, if you carry something too conspicuous, it can easily be stolen. During the measurements, Ritzy strictly says that the next task is mandatory for adventurers of the silver rank. Jean cannot understand, why don't they give stars just for ordinary monster extermination tasks? Red Sea explains enthusiastically that stars are real rewards for contribution, and even those with a bad reputation can earn them. This means that they have no idea what suspicious persons might appear on the task. On the screen it is clearly visible. Jean and Adelheid are copper seekers, and Chris is silver. Jean learns that Adelheid can join thanks to Chris's recommendation, but he himself is not going to go. Retz jokingly grabs Jean and throws, "If you are so sure, then when will this adventure start?" Jean says it will happen in about a month. It all depends on when Amadio arrives in the city. Reddy confirms Amadio is a gold rank adventurer whom the guild summoned specifically for this task. John became fascinated upon learning that Amadio is a powerful mage and immediately wanted to see him in action. Reddy says with full confidence, the guild believes that Amadio will handle any strong monsters if they appear. He approaches closer and asks another question. His curiosity only grows after the news about the powerful mage. He leans closer to Reddy and whispers that Amadio also sees spirits. That night Jean sets off alone into the forest full of spirits and monsters. He dreams of catching lizards and collecting their skins to sew bags for everyone. From the dark bushes, a small dark phantom spirit flies up to him. Over time training, Jean easily snatches a corrupted spirit from the air. He holds the small creature and calmly gives it a new name, Black 95. Having finally released the calmed spirit, he now decides to catch others for the peace of Adelgeda. He gazes into the brightly lit forest and feels, soon there will be a lot of work again. Jean walks the city streets, and the title of the new chapter appears on the screen. He is meeting with Adelheid in Note and sincerely apologizes for making them wait. He hands over the freshly made bags and says that their order is ready. Note it's about payment, but Jean says so calmly that he will pay later. He thinks that thanks to his skill, the bags are barely noticeable, but still asks himself if it's too early to go shopping. Adelheid sighs, there is still plenty of time before the task starts, but there are more and more strangers. Sean finally understands. Ritzy was right, rough adventurers have really gathered in the city. On the screen appears a large wooden structure against a clear sky dotted with spots. Two thugs block their way, throw bold looks at Jean, and mockingly say that he has a nice face, then demand money. Ritzy looks into Jane's eyes and asks why he became the target, then quietly advises to just accept it. Suddenly an invisible force threw Ritzy back, and he screamed in surprise. Chris looks over his shoulder and asks if Ginny is okay. She only nods in response. The bright and noticeable Chris Disc was annoyed that others sneaked into the party without an invitation. Standing over the defeated, Jean praises his courage, and he mumbles indistinctly about the black bear. The butler suggests everyone go together to the neighboring restaurant and celebrate the reunion. Several people raised their wooden mugs up and cheerfully shouted a toast in chorus. John, with genuine curiosity, asks his friends what they have been doing since they last met. Rhett says he helped Chris gather herbs. They both needed at least a little rest from everything. He admits that he himself left earlier and therefore cannot judge anyone. Then Jean asks what about Dean. Adelheid, not hiding her surprise, asks if Dean is looking for a new home and planning to move. Dean explains that since he left home, his mother has been helping his sister Emily with household chores. Jean fell silent and suddenly realized the guild is training Dean to keep him away from his sister. Delgada, disguised as Ash, says she came hunting for a bear, and Jean catches himself thinking she is extremely confident and completely unshakable. While June was holding the cup, he was suddenly enlightened. He finally understood what he had long heard. He tells Dean that he feels as if everyone calls him Black Bear, and Dean only confirms yes, that's true. Delgade notices that Ash and Bear are indeed a very strong team. Usually, the ADS Jean is also nearby. Jean quietly thinks to himself that he would much prefer to be called Wolf. Chris enthusiastically agrees that a bear does not suit the refined, iris-like beauty of Jean at all. Red Sea takes a sip from the cup and immediately begins to share his thoughts. He proudly says that the name Wolf belongs to the terrible wolf King Valmoa. John asks again, Valmoa. Chris confirms he was a legendary adventurer. The image of Valmoa in a cloak appears while Dean quietly and bitterly tells that he was his apprentice. Dean, not hiding his feelings, confesses he decided to become an adventurer precisely because of his sincere sympathy for Valmoa, and because of this he even blushed. Jean smiles and, to change the subject, raises a book. He hands friends custom-made sheaths and sincerely thanks them for their support. Dean, with a sparkle in his eyes, accepts the gift and looks inside the new sheaths. With wide-open eyes, he says in surprise that everything inside is lined with leather and asks if it is really worth it. No rewards needed. Adelheid refuses money because for her the most important thing is that they return home safe. She solemnly promises a real feast, a whole roasted cow. Join us, we are simply delighted by such an offer. Other tavern visitors with burning eyes ask if they can join the celebration after completing the task. Jean raises his cup again and sincerely wishes everyone a happy return from the upcoming journey. The scene shifts to the inn above it. In the night, sky smoke curls from the chimney. Jean's group is already getting ready to leave, while Chris and Retsai stay for one more drink. John does not hide his surprise. Why is Retsai going the same way? Retsai just smiled and explained that he rents a cheap room nearby. Retz angrily complains that some important uncle is renovating the toilet, and because of that is raising his rent. Jean turns away in shame. He suddenly realizes that he is the leader, while Nota and Adelheid look at him. Everyone noticed. The new toilets made the old smells simply unbearable. Jean wonders if this is some kind of charitable mission. Behind distant mountains, the sun rises brightly, announcing the start of a new day. Jean slowly stretches, yawns widely and wakes up, while Rish peacefully sleeps sweetly nearby in his basket. Sitting at a quiet breakfast, he decides, today he will go deep into the forest again. Jin instantly flickers and, using his teleportation ability, finds himself in the forest. He sees a swarm of flickering black spirits already waiting for him to start his daily work of saving them. He begins the long task, giving them names, whispering black again and again. He sighs with relief, thinking he has made good progress. Near his hand, one ghost slowly circles. He knows the troops will soon pass by, and he can't wait to see Amadio's magic with his own eyes. He decided to make a contract with a tiny forest fairy so she would become his scout. With a firm intention to stick to the plan, he boldly moves a little deeper into the forest to explore new places. He recalls the map from the gods. It shows the forest to the east. Their power does not reach there. Standing on the threshold of the unknown, he sighs deeply, gathers his spirit, and steps forward. Each step broke branches underfoot and revealed that a great creature was approaching. From the forest burst a giant wild boar. On its snout were 3 sharp horns. Jin nimbly instantly dodges the attack, realizing that before him is a creature with 3 horns, a boar. He summons his sword for beheading, and magical energy begins to whirl around his outstretched arm. With one lightning-fast and confident strike, he effortlessly fells the terrifying monster. He activates his storage skill, and the huge carcass of the monster instantly disappears right before his eyes. Turning around, he suddenly notices strange plants nearby. He recognizes these plants and smiles broadly. They are a type of wild asparagus, so he decides to cook them later. He happily picks several stalks and is already thinking about sharing them with Ash and others. He bends down and suddenly someone new appears nearby. He raises his head, straining to understand who it is. Beautiful snow panther with 1 horn Yukihayu quietly emerges from the forest. The mythical creature softly whimpers, pressing its paw to its mouth. Jean's eyes widen in genuine shock when he sees the legendary creature. He stammers, trying to comprehend what he has seen, but still recognizes it is Yukihayu. The creature quietly makes a sound again, as if trying to whisper something to him. The Jin intently gazes at Yukihu, trying to decipher what it wants to say. Suddenly a voice sounded in his head, saying, the creature has a request for him. A majestic white deer appears, and like a messenger, conveys Yukihu's request to help Majoru make a deal. The Jin was stunned. Suddenly a second creature appeared and began translating the words of the first. He froze in surprise. What kind of creatures are these, and is Yukihu a spirit? Yukihu firmly says that it is a sacred creature, and its horn is pure, without any dark poison. Jean asks about Majoru, and the white deer replies that Majoru is his good friend. He feels that Majoru is turning into a black spirit and needs his help. The creatures offer him a reward. They can build a shelter for him anywhere he wishes. They say this sanctuary will become a safe refuge, a place that will not admit monsters or dark spirits. John realizes that a base in the forest is exactly what he needs for his studies of spirit names. He agrees to their terms and asks where to go. Yukihayu simply says, get on the deer. He jumps onto the deer's back, grabs the antlers and says, ready. The deer digs its hoof into the ground, tenses up about to suddenly dash off. A sudden burst of speed sharply throws Jin backward. Jean shouts at the deer, it suddenly lunged, and everything around flies by in a blurred stream. He holds tightly onto the antlers, stunned, and a little scared by that incredible speed. The deer suddenly freezes, sharply pressing its hooves into the ground. Jean is carried forward, and he flies off the deer's back straight onto the grass. He gets up, a little stunned and irritated, and starts shouting at the creature for suddenly stopping without any warning. Yukihu quietly but confidently tells him that Majoru the horse spirit has already arrived. A dark stallion with a mane and tail burning like black flames proudly steps into the clearing. The horse looks at him angrily, as if asking, "Why has some man appeared here?" Jean stares at the creature and suddenly realizes this is definitely a Majoru. He notices that the horse is already terribly spoiled. Its shoulder seems to disappear into the shadow. Eye to eye with the spirit, without looking away, he asked its name to start a contract. He remembers the names of spirits grow in power when they find new connections. The Majoru just laughs at this idea and refuses to make a contract with a mere human. The Jinn was puzzled about how to persuade the stubborn creature and imagined that magical circles would be needed for this. He refuses magic, choosing a much simpler and more direct method. With incredible strength, John suddenly lunged forward and with one blow knocked the huge horse to the ground. Pressing her stunned soul, he calmly whispers for her not to be afraid and asks her name. Yukihayu covers her face with her paw. She thinks Jane is doing something too cruel. Majora Svitsa was completely stunned and frightened by how unexpectedly strong this person turned out to be. John leans over the defeated spirit and quietly but persistently asks again, "What is your name?" In the very heart of the forest, Jean quietly whispers the name Majoru, preparing to make a new deal. He stands alone among the dense thickets and constantly repeats that he wants to find a connection. Suddenly his hand glowed with a soft light. He gasped in surprise. Holding his chest, he whispered that he had lost all magic, but the deal was successful. The majestic deer jokingly recounts how hard it was for him, and this greatly annoys the leopard. Jean asks the spirits if they know any nice place where their kind can gather together. The white deer bows its head, as if simply inviting Jean to sit on its back. The spirit horse Majoru is impressed by the courage of the man who dared to ride the deer. Riding the stag, Janice was surprised how comfortable it was to ride it. Suddenly the deer bolts, and Yan clings to it in fear, eyes wide open. The forest around them flashes as a continuous blur as they rush at incredible speed. Suddenly the ride ends, and Jane falls face first right into the bushes. He pretends to be the master, and the deer quietly asks if he likes the new place. Looking around, a smile lit up John's face. The clearing turned out to be much better than he expected. Two magical creatures shout that they are about to create a protective barrier. The horned leopard closes its eyes and quietly hums, as if gathering unstoppable, powerful energy within itself. A shimmering wave of magic spreads around and rapidly envelops the entire clearing. Now a huge transparent dome stretched over the sanctuary, isolating it from the whole world. The Jinn tightens with excitement. The barrier might not let in his new spirit horse. Stagria convinces him, with this contract, Major will be able to pass through the territory calmly and without obstacles. When the task is completed, the spirit says goodbye to them and sincerely thanks for the help. In a dazzling flash of light, two majestic forest guardians instantly disappear. John remained alone, immersed in the peace of his newly built home. He takes out his map and notices something new on it. He freezes and looks intently. He, overwhelmed with surprise, notices a new place has appeared on the parchment. He wonders, does the map now show the territory of Magyar, and not just the places he has already visited? A sincere smile plays on his face as he imagines finishing the work on the map. Standing by the calm pool, he listens to the silence and imagines how best to use his new quiet place. The scene shifts to the bustling trading city of Narua, spread out on the very seashore. Jin arrives in the city, drawn to the buildings. He wants to study the architecture and take ideas from there for his future projects. He stops to admire a luxurious window made of numerous round glass panes. Focusing, he activates his powerful skill of evaluation and persistently probes everything to learn more. When he works, it is clear these glasses are truly high quality and very transparent. He compares this to the ordinary bubbly glass from the city of Kassam. In the shop, he is captivated by the beautiful parchment and skillfully carved boxes. Next, he stops, admiring the display window with beautiful dresses and sparkling jewelry. He lifts a beautiful red glass to his hands and, without hesitation, decides to buy it, although it is not cheap. Having boarded the Pothacary train, he suddenly wondered how developed medicine is here. His eyes open wide in amazement when he notices a huge barrel stuffed with cocoa beans. The seller calls it medicine for youth, but John knows it is truly bitter. A man with a shaky smile explains that aristocrats drink it with milk and sugar, and its price is constantly rising. Jean is bitterly disappointed when he learns how insanely expensive these beans are. Although the price was astronomical, he so longed to taste the flavor of his homeland that he still bought these products. He thinks to process these beans requires considerable work, so they become even more valuable. He smiles, rejoicing that he can learn more about delicious food in this new world. Someone loudly calls out and gestures toward a young boy with black hair. A respectable elderly man with a cane looks at him and admiringly notes how handsome he is. Jean freezes for a moment, embarrassed, thinking that the grandfather might be courting him. He instantly pulls himself together and politely asks if the gentleman needs any help. The man hurriedly explained that he was just looking closely at Jones's backpack. It is a new model from the Egger Guild. The old man thoughtfully notes that the city of Ajir is quite far away. Jean stands gazing at the snow-covered mountains and thinks that he himself can make better equipment. The man apologizes for stopping him and waves goodbye with a smile. Jin Switz suddenly realizes a stranger has approached him for the 10th time already. He dreams that some merchant will come and buy goods from him, then he will be able to show and advertise his new toilet design. Having examined all the interesting places, he decides that it is time to focus on the main goal. He approaches a woman in the shop and, with quiet curiosity in his voice, asks what she is looking for. He sighs and says that he is looking for a book about spirits. He persistently clarifies that he needs a rare book with a detailed description of how to catch spirits. A serious young man firmly says, such books are not for sale to just anyone who desires them. He suspects if such a book exists anywhere, it will be found right here, but it is sold illegally. Jean thinks that this book can be found in some suspicious antique shop. An old woman advises him to go to a real bookstore there. The chance of finding what he needs is much higher. He gently asks her how to get to the bookstore, where he can find exactly what he needs. He enters the shop, and a small bell suddenly announces his arrival. The seller, with a slight smile, asks if he is looking for books for decoration, and immediately shows two completely different options. The seller explains, one type is just an empty box for storing small items. Jean passionately explains that he needs a real book that can be read, and that also looks good. The clerk hands over two books, one with blank pages, the other full of jokes. He notices the notebook without inscriptions costs more because you can actually write something in it. Jean squints and also activates his skill to see the magic hidden in the books. He notices a tiny fairy perched on the joke book. The text in this book constantly changes by itself. The little spirit is clearly surprised when his hand approaches the book cover. The clerk explains, this playful book is written in a language that only its owner will understand. Jean feels deeply. It is needed to keep secrets, especially magic and curses. He believes that without the key, deciphering this text would be incredibly difficult. Suddenly he realizes there must be another book that forms a pair with this one. He places both books together, and at that moment, understands that they are parts of one series. The seller warns him that the set is expensive, but Jean gladly agrees to buy it. He sincerely thanks the seller for the help, and holding his valuable purchase, leaves the store. He shines with excitement. These books are genuine, with magical souls, not simple copies. The matter is settled. All the money spent, he prepares to leave the city. That evening he settled with the book by the fireplace, and nearby his faithful wolf sleeps peacefully. He learns that the risks of spiritual contracts are related to how well a person suits the spirit and how powerful their magic is. The book says that contracts can summon spirits to places where they are completely unwelcome. He knows summoning a fire spirit on a snowy mountain will take an incredible amount of strength. He thinks spirits are all around, but each one is completely different. He remembers the goddesses Miss Hut and Carolfa. Both are light spirits, but very different from each other. He smiles, recalling how the light bulb vainly tried to light up and excused itself, saying it was not its fault. He realizes that he rarely listened to the requests of the spirits of his home. The next morning the sun rose and wrapped his quiet estate in soft warmth. On the table a luxurious breakfast, mountains of meat and fresh croissants. Adelhaida, his guest, eats with her eyes closed, sincerely delighted. Her butler also agrees. A tasty, hot breakfast is a real pleasure. Jean smiles, explains that he prepared all the perishable products before they set off on the journey. He notices that a hot breakfast here is a real rarity among simple and cold dishes. In the note, they asked with interest whether the family of Adelhaid, who has noble origins, also refuses to cook in the morning. Jean says most people work from early morning, so saving firewood is a usual thing for them. Dinner ended, and the clean plate speaks for itself. They really liked it. She will say it's almost time to leave and ask his friends to wait a little longer. Adelheid and her butler watch in surprise as Jean approaches them. He extends a large, heavy bundle, and Adelheid accepts it with noticeable effort. Jean laughed and said, "There is so much stuff in the car for Dean's party." He waves goodbye and they leave, sincerely thanking him. Now left alone, John decisively said he would go look for building materials himself. He carefully examines a stack of good, strong bricks for his new project. Then he lingered and carefully looked at several nicely decorated tiles with patterns. Jean smiles as he talks about his plans and shows his purchases to the friendly blonde seller. At home on his estate, Rich joyfully announces that he can now join Jean in the new safe zone. Happily jumping around Jones's legs, the fluffy spirit wolf rejoices with all his heart. Jean picks up the excited Rich and, teleporting, takes him along. They step onto the sunlit field, and his boots softly press into the fluffy green grass. Holding Rich in his arms, Jean notices a small glowing spirit flying by in the air. But as soon as they arrive, all the surrounding spirits suddenly scatter in panic. John, stunned, wonders why they fled and directly asks Rich if he scared them. He carefully sets Rich down on the ground and gently says that playing inside the white line is safe. The year 1917, he thinks, it's time to start, and takes a shovel from his magical hiding place. He plunges the shovel deep into the ground, preparing to begin construction. He wants to build right here, in this clearing, a small 2-story house. In his imagination, a cozy second floor where one can rest after a hard day. He will also arrange a large garden where Rich can freely play while he works. For several days now, he has been tirelessly gathering plaster, wood, and bricks for the fireplace. Tired after hard work, he leans on the shovel and decides to catch his breath. He smiles and calls Rich, who excitedly examines the new place. Rich happily drinks cool water from the bowl that John served. For lunch, Jin prepared himself a tasty bagel with filling a real delicacy. He settled down at a small wooden table and calmly savors the food in the cozy clearing. Meanwhile, Rich found a sturdy stick and sniffs it with curiosity. He sits down, relaxes, and calmly enjoys his catch, fully satisfied with what he got. John dreams of a bright garden and passionately wants to craft his own coffee siphon. His peaceful lunch was suddenly interrupted by an unexpected guest. A majestic snow leopard with horns, Yuki appears before his eyes. Behind him appears a majestic white deer with beautiful silvery antlers. A large black horse joins the procession of magical creatures. Jean freezes in horror when the third creature suddenly appears. The three animals look intently and seriously. They do not take their eyes off Rich. In Jean's thoughts, a voice sounded, "Why has the great Lord Rish appeared here?" She was breathless with surprise when she heard the respect with which they addressed her little companion. The year 1939. The creatures froze in amazement. Their gazes could not comprehend how their master ended up here. John repeats aloud, "Lord Rish," not understanding what is happening. The year 1941. The animals recall with trembling. 5 years ago, their master disappeared after a failed attempt to summon him. John says that his story exactly matches Thiersch arrived at that very time. He turns to his companion and asks, "Rich, were you really the chief of Yuki Hughes?" Rich simply tilts his head, pressing the stick to his lips, and looks completely confused. John understands. Rish either lost his memory or he simply doesn't care, so he stops talking about it. He still wonders, how is Rish acquainted with such influential people? Standing before the untouched forest, he thoughtfully asks himself, was this forest ever Rish's home? Rish chooses a cloak for himself, and Jean agrees. The forest suits the wolf best. The deer does not calm down. He considers himself stronger and richer than any other spirit. The horse adds that Rish is freer than all his relatives. Yuki Hayo finishes by saying that Rish's voice can reach the edge of the world. Gina is a little annoyed when Yuki Hayo constantly praises Rish. He tries to return to work, but the creatures suddenly say some name. He is surprised that they call Rish the Apostle of the Wind. Rich found a tape measure and proudly hands it to Jean. The Jinn again hears in his memory the words of the creatures about past events. He knows well his home is protected by a barrier that separates it from the whole world. Standing among the trees, he thoughtfully asks himself, is the name Rishius connected with this forest? He asks the creatures to explain what exactly they mean by the riddle of victory. The deer quietly says that Rish was connected with a hero of the past generation. The year 1961. Jean Gross burns with anger. He thinks that the former hero spoiled the forest. The deer enthusiastically explains that the hero crafted a boat that can sail on water. The year 1963. John suddenly realizes it is about a ship, a gift that in the film was given to the city of Narua. Suddenly he is seized by fear. What if Rish begins to hate him because he uses the same abilities? He crouches down, feeling heavy and anxious in his soul because he fears that Rish will judge him. But Rish simply rolls onto his back, asks to have his belly scratched, and instantly forgets all his fears. The creatures whisper that the forest still has not returned to its western place. 1968 year. Jin thinks people can feel safe only in cities and villages. In 1969, you enter the forest, and it is as if you step into a world of spirits and creepy creatures. He knows that people expand their territories, they cut down forests and build ships. The horse instantly understands. This summoner is by no means a good creature. He quietly reflects, Rish, explaining that it was thanks to him that he managed to avoid death. Jin admits he gained this land in exchange for helping two people. 1974 year. He remembers how he was told that a dangerous creature settled here. 1975 year. Suddenly, a beautiful woman appears and says that the hero is weak, but someone protects him. 1976 year. Jin Shorzor keeps his distance, and Rish gently licks his hand. He does not regret replenishing his supplies, but his heart suggests he needs even more useful things. 1978. By nature, he can cook well, but he understands he must also learn to fight. In 1979, with a trembling voice, he asked Rish if he lost his memories along with most of his power. He ponders his deal with the gods has rather limited possibilities. 1981. Yukihayu confesses he does not know all the details of Rish's past. 1982. The deer with tears in his eyes proclaims that Lord Rish is great and merciful. Jean raises his hand and says, understood, no more explanations. Returning home, he is already eagerly preparing to enjoy a delicious dinner. He folds his hands together and sincerely thanks before the appetizing dishes on the table. 1986. He contentedly slurps noodles, savoring their deep, rich flavor. In 1987, he wonders whether to continue his construction and agricultural projects in the reserve. In 1988, he decided to rely on his ability to evaluate and set out in search of new seeds for his garden. He feels that his knowledge even allows him to grow new types of plants. He cannot wait for the day when he can finally sit in a restaurant and taste delicious food. 1991. He finishes his food and rejoices his body was enhanced even before he ended up here. 1992 year. Two mountain peaks proudly rise under the bright sun. 1993 year. At his construction site, he breaks stones with a heavy hammer. 1994 year. He carefully kneels down and gently levels the ground, preparing it for the foundation. 1995 year. At night, he gives a name to a small dark spirit around which magical lights circle. In 1996 year, he walks through his fields and thinks about how step by step he achieves success. He sincerely believes that the spirits will help the vegetables he took from his pantry to grow. He counts his plants one by one and eagerly awaits the day when he can finally harvest them. In 1999, for a moment he was stopped by the thought of Adelhaide's troops, but he was not particularly worried. Raising the rope, he calls out, "Let's go, Rish. Are you ready for the next task?" With a smile, Jean jokingly throws a ball of rope to his spirit companion Rish. Rish catches the toy mid-jump so skillfully that he cannot help but rejoice in his victory. The little wolf spirit happily returns with his prey, glowing with satisfaction. Jean gently strokes Rish's fur with a smile and enthusiastically praises him for the wonderful catch. He addresses the interested wealthy men and says, "It's time to go back inside." The year 2006, he has long nurtured a dream to conduct a new, special experiment. In his workshop, he excitedly talks about his plan to create a magical circle. Following the instructions in the book, he carefully crushes herbs and minerals with a pestle. He dissolves the powder in water with alcohol, and a special ink is born. When all the materials are ready, he focusedly begins to create a complex magical drawing. He gently fills the delicate quill with the freshly made ink. With a compass, he carefully draws a complex geometric pattern from the book page. After that, he takes symbols from another grimoire and weaves them into the previous instructions. Holding his breath, he aloud contemplates which spirit should be summoned first. From the circle, with a small joyful exclamation, a tiny earth fairy with wings emerges. A cheerful jelly-like aquatic slug joyfully appears in the world and immediately starts hopping. Two fiery salamanders run out and immediately start chasing each other in a circle. Jean shouted irritably, "Don't run out so suddenly." He chases them away because he is afraid they will spoil his neatly drawn parchment. He froze, confused, trying to understand what to do next in this chaos. He decides to take a risk and summon another element ice. Rich suddenly appears before him, happily smiling and barely catching his breath. In 2023, Jules suddenly realized that Rich is the spirit of ice. He asked Rich if he could soon help him make ice cream. Jean says this time he will choose the spirit in advance. He finally decides, since the field is already created, it's time to call the harvest. He draws the sign of the goddess of harvest and pours magic into it. From the freshly drawn magic circle, as if sighing, a stream of smoke easily bursts out. A friendly old woman approaches it and kindly introduces herself Val. She explains that she is responsible for the earth and its bountiful harvest. Jean stammers already knew who she was and admitted it himself. He panics and does not understand. Is this someone's joke, or did he really summon some god? His eyes open wide in surprise when the ink on the circle begins to hiss. A hand points to the circle, which is fading, and Jung turns around, looking around in confusion. He discovers with surprise, God Vafon is standing right behind him. Vafon gestures with his hand, and the last drops of magical ink dissolve right before their eyes. Jin confusedly explains that he did everything by the book, but the circle simply disappeared. Vafon angrily says that the book is wrong, and Hackle calmly explains that the ink has its limitations. Suddenly in the small workshop, a light, otherworldly laughter echoed. Suddenly Harolfa appears and tells Jane that she seems to be having a great time. The goddess smiles gently and says that she enjoys watching him. Jean, raising his hands in confusion, exclaims, "When did everyone manage to come? I didn't even notice." Harolfa says that this room is simply teeming with little good spirits. She closes her eyes and suddenly feels how truly cozy it is here. It is known that these spirits appear in the morning and disappear by evening. Jean did not expect the entire pantheon has gathered. Ordeal tells him he just needed to ask them about summoning the spirits. Gina asks with interest if he will be taught this, and if it is something like an extra class after the main one. Instead of serious fighting, the board, resembling a deer, decides it's better to just spar. The action shifts to a forest glade, bathed in warm rays of the sun. Vafon is already ready. The tension in the air, he impatiently waits for John to finally start their training duel. Jean rushes forward and lightning fast attacks the god. He tightly grips the sword, and on his face is unwavering determination. Vafon, as if it were nothing, effortlessly stops the attack with one hand and catches the blade. From the blow, Jean steps back and lets out a cry of pain. He painfully hits the ground and writhes in pain after the fall. They above watch anxiously as Jean's movements become increasingly worse. Jane, confused, raises her eyes and asks, "What does God mean?" He admits he tried to weave elements of his friend's style, who adore adventures, into his work. John, blushing with shame, notices that his movements have become clumsy and sloppy. He sincerely admits he simply copied others without creating his own style. Fan, with sadness in his voice, asked what happened to his image of the sword. He says it used to look better. Jean closes his eyes and imagines what true art of swordsmanship should be for him. He remembers how he watched bright fantasy films and realistic dramas about samurai with fascination. He feels that it is the samurai films that have imprinted much deeper in his memory. It seems to him as if his current sword suits a hero from a fantasy game more. Suddenly he realizes the whole problem is in the very style of the sword. Before him, his decorated sword for beheading hangs in the air, and he stands, lost in thought. He raises his eyes, and suddenly a surprised understanding flashes across his face. Vafon creates a new sword and, shining with delight, exclaims that this is a true Japanese sword. A beautiful katana, raised by denim-clad hands, hangs in anticipation and glows with power. He instantly notices a fantasy silver chain, not the familiar classic Sajo cord. Buffin stands with crossed arms and says that this is an unusual design. Jin nods and says that this sword is from his native country. He presses his thumb to the tube, preparing to draw the blade. With one jerk, he pulls out the katana and takes a fighting stance. Dark energy tightly wraps around the blade, and he swings it with new confidence. But Fawn asks if he is ready to continue their training. Determination burns on Jean's face as he asks Fawn to continue. The duel begins again, a piercing clang of metal echoes over the clearing. Their blades clash again, and Jean is now fully focused, nothing distracts him. He jumped and with all his might brought down the katana, delivering a powerful strike. Vafon easily parries the blow and remains calm and focused. Jean believes that bright special effects in fantasy films only confuse. Now that he saw a clear picture, fighting became easier and even more interesting. Fawn notes every step forward he makes, and John thanks them, shining with pride. Jean knows that this sword cannot harm the one who created it, so he fights bravely, without any fear. Training is completed, and he thoughtfully asks himself, will he ever be able to surpass Vafon? Vish jumped up with joy and gently began licking his cheek. Misha and Karelfa appeared to congratulate him on a job well done. Jean found himself between two beautiful goddesses and felt completely confused. Returning to the workshop, Olniatko calls him by name, holding a book in his hands. Fafon passionately explains that John's initial interpretation in the book is incorrect. He strongly advises John, in 7 days go to the temple in Termist. Termist is an island south of the Caval Peninsula, a new exciting travel destination. Vafon confidently promises that he will help him get the needed book there. Jean realizes that he needs to save money to buy this book in a week. He passes by a hooded person and thinks how many he has imprisoned. In a well-prepared field, young, healthy seedlings stretch out in even rows. Jean looks back and smiles awkwardly. Something begins to bother him. John remembered how Day spoke about that special taste of human souls. The local plants amazed the young god, and Yun also could not contain his admiration. The usual food of Jin was slowly transforming. Instead of simple dishes, exquisite salads appeared. He arrived at the huge, bustling trading city of Narua. A refined, beautifully designed sign on the building seemed to silently tell about the elegance of this city. He sat alone on the restaurant terrace and admired the wonderful sea view with delight. In front of him stood a luxurious dinner that enticed, a juicy steak, tender pâté, and delicious pasta. He savored tasty pasta with truffles and could not help but admire how modern the cuisine was here. The merchant smiled and gladly told him that the skin of his monster would sell like hotcakes here. Now that the money was all right, he wondered what to do next. He went to the blacksmith and, holding his breath, looked closely at the various swords sold in the shop. He is in pain. He never found a sword like the one that beheaded. He spotted a bent blade and thought, this is the best I can find. Then the seller offered to show him that spiritual weapon that was in the store. Smith explained, this weapon it was created or inhabited by spirits. Jin suddenly realized that his sword is a special spiritual weapon created by a doe. Blacksmiths say such a weapon needs a comfortable place, not just a magical storage. Thanking the man, Yan moved forward, now feeling much better the power of his magical sword. Returning to his room, he immediately began preparing for the daily divination ritual. He stood over the bowl of water, focused, ready to observe the adventures. The water swirled, and on its surface appeared the image of the squad that set out on the mission. Every day he was already used to watching the Conquest team. Over a cup of tea, he suddenly recognized in them the very same famous Amadio company from the Golden League. He called for help from the spirits nearby, and thanks to them the vision became extraordinarily clear. He did not take his eyes off the warrior and wondered why 2 women were accompanying him. While gnawing on a walnut, he noticed that the warrior had other admirers as well. He felt that these 3 travelers were truly special. He immediately recognized the woman in the cloak as a sorceress with a bright spirit. Apparently, the archeress had a connection with the wind, and nature. Her bow looked like a grapevine. He could not hold back laughter. The battle's spirit looked exactly like a steppe dog. One question tormented him: how could a steppe dog appear in this world at all? His friends surfaced in his thoughts, and he suddenly wondered, where is Ash's party now? In the vision, Chris was walking through the forest with 4 companions. Adelheid suddenly noticed some spirits were swirling around Chris and Dean. John remembered how his spirit responded strangely to the smell of Dean's boots. Suddenly he remembered how he admired Retz's lush beard. He silently begged his soul, don't invent new strange fascinations for yourself. He noticed spirits of the golden level were much larger than his tiny dark spirits. In his vision, the warrior froze before a huge lizard monster. The warrior smiled and, gripping his sword, decisively rushed forward to meet the beast. The mage calmly waved his hand, preparing a powerful spell to finish the fight. She quietly whispered the incantation and concentrated all her great magical power within herself. A dazzling flash burst from her staff. The light struck the creature directly. The lizard died instantly. Its lifeless body fell heavily to the ground. June stood stunned. She simply could not believe how strong the spirit's magic was. But suddenly he felt that something was wrong with one of the team members. The man in armor drew his sword, and his face remained icy and completely emotionless. He followed the archer as she moved away from the others. Suddenly he sharply raised his sword upwards, preparing to strike her in the back. The blade quietly and confidently flew through the air, as if wanting to kill. The archers swiftly turned and deflected the unexpected attack with their dagger. A desperate struggle flared between them. The one who was once her comrade was now her enemy. Jean watched in shock. The archer knew how to fight well even in close combat. It was clear as if the man was not himself. His gaze was empty and detached. A small black evil spirit firmly clung to the man's chest. The spirit broke free from the man and rushed straight at the archer. It returned to its master. He now looked much weaker. The spirit again lunged at the archer, turning into a dark, blurred shadow. It was thrown back as if an invisible wall prevented it from going further. The archer froze in amazement when he realized that his arrow was deflected. The dark spirit returned to its first master, who was already barely holding on. John understood the spirit needs a body to maintain its power. The female archer felt that some spirit had possessed her friend, but she could not see it. John fixed his gaze on her and held his breath, tensely waiting to see what she would do next. He pondered, how can one even defeat a dark spirit? A weapon against spirits could kill the person possessed by the spirit, but it felt deeply wrong. When Grimm was finished off, the female archer drew her bow, entwined with vines. Horror slid through John's heart. He realized she was going to destroy the ship itself. The man roared when the arrow hit him. A dark flash of energy burst from the wound. Jean stood in shock. He suddenly realized how little human life was valued here. He understood death comes here much more often. He lightly slapped his cheeks, as if encouraging himself to calm down and focus. He took a deep breath and looked at the bowl again. He remembered you can't touch the spirits until you strike their bearer. He couldn't understand why the archer didn't attack when the spirit revealed itself. And at that very moment, as if out of nowhere, an adventurer from another group accidentally stumbled here. The man stared in shock at the body of his fallen comrade. He rushed to the body, completely unaware of the hidden danger. John, with a heavy heart, realized they seemed to have been allies. The dark spirit broke free from the dead body and rushed to find a new bearer. It bit into the chest of the newcomer, and he screamed in pain. The shooter and the man, frightened, feverishly talk to each other, but neither understands the other. She was gripped by horror. The archer does not see the black spirit at all. On the new spiritual site at John's, people's impressions were completely different. Some saw auras, while others noticed nothing at all. The new possessed man firmly grabbed his chest, feeling the spirit slowly taking over him from within. He was restless. Was the newcomer displacing his own body? The warrior asked the sorceress with a trembling voice if she could see 2 more members of the squad. John felt the words of Ritsai come to mind. I can see spirits in people, or I have a connection with what is hidden inside. He was curious about what this strange state could mean, as if he was half not himself. Although it was not his business, he knew things that could solve this problem. When Ashen and his friends were nearby, something ignited within him. He felt he had to do something. He made a decision completely confidently, without hesitation. He called his spirits of shadow and light, preparing for action. He asked them, smear my face and lift me up. He also asked them to raise his hood, while he himself did not use his legs. With a confident smile, he finally completed his mysterious magical transformation. The traveler froze over the body and did not even suspect that someone new had already appeared nearby. The warrior, whose voice trembled with confusion, asked what just happened. The archer admitted that she did not know who it was, only saying that the man attacked suddenly. She apologized for her action. Shock and regret were readable on her face. The archer and the figure in the hood stood back to back, tensely preparing for a duel. The travelers eagerly wanted to find out who this mysterious newcomer was and where he had appeared from. John simply smiled and said, even if I say my name, you still won't understand. Delhite recognized her friends and sighed happily. Her secret, that she was actually a woman, remained unrevealed. Finding herself amid the lights, Jane begs the spirits of sound to make her voice quieter. He pointed with his finger at the young boy and said he would speak only with him. Me, the young adventurer asked in surprise, stammering, not understanding at all why everyone suddenly focused on him. When Jean extended his hand, the man felt something strange, as if his fingers were piercing through him. Jean brushed off the strange sensation and decided that he had just imagined it. He instantly covered the man's eyes and tore the dark spirit from his chest. The traveler froze in horror in this creature. He recognized the weeping spirit. Other team members, a warrior and a woman, watched everything with complete, open amazement. The woman thoughtfully wondered if some spirit had possessed the young traveler. She noticed the man lying unconscious had behaved strangely before. John noticed a man who was looking at his hands with a confused expression. He glanced at the fallen warrior and with relief saw that he was still alive. Jean knelt beside the unconscious traveler, resolutely preparing to help. He activated a healing skill, his hands filled with soft, healing light. The wounded man groaned, quietly, slowly regaining consciousness. His eyes slowly opened as the powerful healing magic began to take effect. One of the companions looked surprised and asked if the man had really woken up. The group gathered together as the warrior recovered and stood up, and everyone called it a true miracle. Genwatch smiled gently, sincerely glad that he was able to help. The woman froze in amazement, couldn't believe he had recovered after such a condition. She approached John and blurted out, "Who are you really?" She narrowed her eyes and asked him about the spirits swirling around them. John says usually he asks the spirits to hide, but today they decided to help. He looked at the woman and realized she definitely sees them. She suspiciously squinted and asked if he had accidentally come across these drinks somewhere along the way. Jean suddenly realized that because of that thing, the man's company had been noticed. He sighed quietly, and the others silently watched him go. Delhada felt the watchful gaze of her brother and fervently hoped that he had not uncovered her disguise. The burly adventurer sharply shouted to Jing, asking him to wait for he was already about to leave. Jing activated his teleportation magic, and his body dissolved into tiny particles of light. He suddenly disappeared from the clearing, leaving everyone behind. Appearing in another place, he held the captured spirit in his hands and hoped that one problem was already solved. He decided to release this large dark spirit deep into the forest. He recalled another powerful creature, a black horse that stubbornly preserved its will. He knew that these dark spirits, when attacking, unleash unbearable pain on others. He strictly forbade the spirits with whom he had a pact from devouring each other. He smiled at the small creature in his hands and realized it was time to return home. He looked at the distant roof of his estate under the starry sky. Returning home, filled with gratitude, he whispered thanks to the little fairy spirits for sharing their power. He stood over the bowl and thought what happened after he left the adventures. For a moment a glade flashed by, where the whole company remained. He imagined them bowing deeply to the very ground, sincerely apologizing. He threw Riley a smile, thinking they were apologizing, although he himself had nearly died. He felt as if something had seized him, and immediately thought the archer was aiming at him. He decided next time he sees Adelheid, he will definitely ask her what happened. Now the scene unfolds in the cozy countryside house of the Dionio family. She screamed, and his younger brothers and sisters, laughing and jumping, joyfully tried to make him laugh. Jean came and said to Shibasama, "Just take his clothes off." The younger children with shining eyes asked if they could help, and Gina gladly agreed. The twins beamed with joy and, giggling, rushed at their older brother, causing mischief. During the flight, she was as close as the guy who was happily taking them off himself. Mama came with clean clothes for her son, who was left without a t-shirt. She explained that their clothes constantly get dirty, and Jean immediately offered to wash everything. Shiva was blushing with embarrassment and bitterly lamented that John had to see him in such a state. Mama paid no attention to him and cheerfully said that he should go wash at the well. John waved his hand when Shiba loudly shouted at his mother not to involve their guest. John tied his hair and rolled up his sleeves. He was ready to get to work. Even amid disgusting, unsanitary conditions, he did not stop thinking about his studies. He imagined how the rain relentlessly washes the dirt from the roads and carries it straight into the houses. He grimaced at the very thought of having to clean horse manure and try to turn it into fuel. He recalled how other farmers he had met simply slept on hay in their barns. He knew that here people grasp at today because they never know what tomorrow will bring. He believed that he could not change the world, but helping friends was within his power. He began sweeping, decided that the house of the good Dionysio must shine with cleanliness. In the evening, the sun gently illuminates the neat and renewed farm. When the family returned home, their house was glowing with cleanliness, and the renovated oven shone the most. She looked surprised and asked if John was by any chance some kind of cleaning genius. Everyone showered him with praise for the good work because, as Jean said, the well was all that remained. Shiva threw out the idea to make tifurjane, and he, sincerely grateful, immediately agreed. Mom asked John, "Bring some quails and eggs for dinner." The youngest children instantly raised their hands. They eagerly wanted to complete the task first. Later, a friend asked Jane a direct question: does she really like cleaning? John frankly admitted that he hates cleaning, and this surprised his friend very much. He explained that he simply cannot stand dirty places, so he is forced to clean them. Mom came with dinner and winked, as if saying, "John just likes everything beautiful." She placed a large hot bowl on the table. It contained baked quail with leek. Jean immediately recognized this dish because she was well versed in it and said it looked very appetizing. Thinking that these leeks were especially tasty, he applied his evaluation skill. The skill confirmed the recipe, and he immediately engraved it in his memory. Mom smiled warmly and called everyone to sit at the table. The family held hands and with grateful smiles thanked for the delicious dinner they shared together. She looked at them with a slight smile, thinking that they were his perfect family. He dreamily thought, would he ever have such a warm family too? He instantly dismissed these thoughts, blushed a little, and bit off a piece. The scene is set among sun-scorched ruins on the shore of Termist Island. She didn't even hesitate, first to enter the temple, and only then spend money on local crafts. As if a memory flashed, he recalled that this very temple was recommended to him during the Thunder Festival. He approached the majestic stone building, and its spire seemed to reach straight into the sky. Inside, a calm elderly man with a long white beard awaited him. John politely raised his hand and asked the old man about a certain book. The man noticed John's black hair and violet eyes, as if straight from the prophecy of God. He confirmed he was told that Jean would come to the temple. The old man closed his eyes and quietly said that he had received a message for him. Jean could not contain his surprise and aloud wondered what kind of message could have come. It seemed strange to him to call it a message when he was delivering it personally. After that, he was noticed. He handed the book to a woman. His task was completed. Jean, with a slight smile, hints he understood everything. The ancient god gauntly gestured for him to follow down the corridor. Rhythmically on the shiny stone floor, their boots clicked. Jean suddenly freezes, something unexpected, instantly grabs his gaze ahead. They stop together in a large house bathed in sunlight. Before them silently stood a stone statue of a man in long clothing, almost life-size. He wonders, could this sad and serious statue be the very day of the Godrava? Grevely explains that he must swear complete silence. The image of young Rordil appears before his eyes, and his solemn promise echoes in the air. Having finished his business, Haschel turns his gaze to the luxurious wall mirror. He presses his hand to the glass. It glows softly. His hand passes effortlessly through the mirror's surface, as if through water. Jean freezes in shock. It becomes clear to him this is probably a secret door. A single trembling candle appears from the dark corridor. A figure in long clothing with a hidden face steps forward, holding a light in their hands.